The first thing you should know about driving Route 77 is that the job posting never asked for a resume, just a commercial license, a clean drug test, and a willingness to work graveyard. The pay was listed as negotiable with signing bonus. I called because my rent was 3 weeks late and my landlord had stopped returning my calls. The electricity in my apartment had that flickering quality that meant the shutoff notice was coming any day. The man on the phone didn't ask why I'd been fired from my last 2 jobs. He didn't ask about the gap in my employment history. He just said, "Show up Tuesday, midnight, the old depot on Industrial. Don't be late." I should have known then. Nobody hires without questions unless they're desperate or hiding something. The depot sat at the end of Industrial Avenue, past the shuttered factories and the chain-link lots full of rusting equipment. I'd driven past it 100 times without ever really seeing it. One of those buildings your eyes just slide over. But pulling into the parking lot that first night, I noticed things. The asphalt was too clean. No oil stains, no cracked pavement, no weeds pushing through. The building itself was vintage 1970s municipal architecture, all flat concrete and narrow windows, but the paint looked fresh. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed with that specific frequency that gets into your back teeth. There were 3 other cars in the lot. I never saw their owners. Inside, the dispatch office felt wrong in ways I couldn't immediately name. Everything was too organized. The bulletin board had safety notices from 1987, union meeting minutes from 1989, and a photo of that year's drivers posed in front of a bus. 12 men and 3 women, all wearing the same navy blue jacket I'd been told to expect. Someone had written, "Route 77, last run," across the bottom in faded marker. I stared at those faces. Not one of them was smiling. "You're the new guy." I turned. The man behind me was maybe 50, with the kind of permanent exhaustion that comes from decades of night shifts. His name tag said, Callahan. Supervisor. "Yeah, I called about..." "I know why you're here." He handed me a manila folder, the old-fashioned kind with the metal clasps. "Your route is 77, decommissioned in 89, but we keep 1 bus running for administrative purposes. You follow the schedule, you follow the rules, you clock out before dawn. Questions?" I had about 50. I asked the safest one. "What happened in 89? Callahan's face didn't change. "Bridge collapse, Terminal Road, morning route, full bus. They never found everyone." He pointed to a door marked Garage. "Your bus is 77B. Keys are in it. Read the rules before you start your shift. Read them out loud. I need to hear you understand them." He walked me to the bus. It was older than I expected, a 1980s model with the rounded front and the accordion doors that hissed when they opened. Someone had maintained it obsessively. The seats were worn but clean. The floor had been mopped recently. I could smell the bleach. The steering wheel was wrapped in electrical tape where the original cover had cracked. And bolted to the dashboard, encased in yellowed plastic, was a paper schedule. The kind they used to print before everything went digital. The stops were listed in dot matrix type. Archer and 5th, 12:17 a.m. Bellevue and Grand, 12:34 a.m. 15 stops total, ending at Terminal Road, 4:47 a.m. Callahan handed me a single sheet of paper, typed on an actual typewriter. The letters were faint in places where the ribbon had been wearing out. "Read it," he said. I read, "Route 77 Operational Protocol. 1. The schedule is not negotiable. Do not pick up passengers at unscheduled stops. 2. The fare box must register wait. If it does not, you have 10 seconds to request exit. 3. Use the rearview mirror only. Do not turn around. 4. No passenger rides more than 3 stops. 5. The overhead lights stay off. 6. At Terminal Road, open the rear emergency door. Do not exit the bus. Do not watch the passengers disembark. Close the door when instructed." Callahan watched my face the entire time. "You understand?" "Sure," I said, because I needed the money, and because arguing with the rules of a night shift bus route seemed insane. Seems straightforward. It is, as long as you follow them. He tapped the schedule. This route doesn't exist on any current map. If someone asks you for directions, you don't answer. If someone asks you to make an unscheduled stop, you don't answer. You drive the route, you follow the rules, you clock out before dawn. He paused at the door. The radio connects you to dispatch. Riley will be on the other end. Riley knows the route. Listen to Riley. Then he was gone, and I was alone in a bus that smelled like diesel and old upholstery and something else underneath it all, something like ozone before a thunderstorm. I turned the key. The engine coughed, caught, rumbled to life. The vibration traveled through the steering wheel, through my hands, into my chest. The dashboard lights glowed sickly yellow. The radio crackled. 77B, this is dispatch. Radio check. The voice was flat, ageless, impossible to gender. This is 77B, I copy. Good. Your first pickup is in 9 minutes. Archer and 5th. Follow the schedule. Follow the rules. If you have questions, ask before you act. Understood? Understood. Clock out before dawn. Don't look back. The radio went silent. I pulled out of the depot at exactly midnight. The streets were empty in the way only a dead industrial neighborhood can be empty. No traffic lights, no late-night diners, no gas stations, just streetlights throwing pools of sodium yellow on cracked sidewalks. I followed the route from memory and from the schedule bolted to my dash. The bus handled like a boat, slow to turn, slower to stop. My neck started aching within 20 minutes from checking the mirrors. The big rearview mirror above my head showed the empty rows of seats stretching back into shadow. At 12:17, I pulled up to Archer and 5th. There was a woman waiting at the stop. She was maybe 60, wearing a floral print dress and carrying a purse that looked like it was made sometime during the Reagan administration. She climbed aboard slowly, dropped a coin in the fare box. I heard the metallic plink, saw the mechanical counter tick over, and sat 3 rows back on the right side. She didn't look at me, didn't say anything, just sat down and stared straight ahead with the kind of blank patience people develop after years of public transit. I closed the doors and pulled away. In the rearview mirror, she didn't move, didn't check her phone because she didn't have one, didn't read, just sat. 2 more stops, 2 more passengers, a man in a factory uniform, a teenager with a boom box balanced on his lap, headphones on, no music playing. They paid their fares. They sat. They stared. By 1:30 a.m., I had 7 passengers, and I was starting to relax. This was just a night bus route. Weird rules, sure, but nothing I couldn't handle. The kind of job where you could let your mind drift, where the repetition became meditative. That's when the woman with the birthday cake got on. She boarded at Bellevue and Grand, 1:46 a.m., right on schedule. She was younger than the others, maybe 30, wearing jeans and a sweater. In her hands, she carried a clear plastic cake carrier, the cheap kind from a grocery store. Through the plastic, I could see the cake, white frosting, blue trim, and letter by letter in shaky, piped icing, "Happy 10th birthday, Sarah." The candles were unlit. The cake looked fresh. She dropped a coin. The fare box registered. She walked past me without a word and sat alone near the middle, the cake carrier balanced on her lap. In the rearview mirror, I watched her stare down at it. She didn't move, didn't adjust her grip, just stared. 3 stops. That was the rule. I counted. At the 3rd stop, she stood, walked to the front, and stepped off into the night. I should have pulled away immediately. I didn't. I watched in the side mirror as she walked across the street toward an empty lot. There was no house, no building, just an empty rectangle of cracked concrete and weeds where something used to be. She walked toward the middle of it, still carrying the cake, and she was gone. Not like she walked out of view. Gone. Like a video glitch. One frame she was there, The next, she wasn't. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I forced myself to breathe, to pull back into traffic, to follow the schedule. The radio stayed silent. The remaining passengers didn't react. I checked the rearview mirror obsessively for the next 30 minutes. At 2:47 a.m., someone stood at a stop that wasn't on the schedule. I almost didn't see him. The stop was between Archer and Pine and Morrison and 12th, a stretch of empty road with no marked bus stop, no bench, no sign. But there he was, a man in a suit standing under a streetlight, one hand raised in that universal gesture of flagging down a bus. My foot moved toward the brake automatically. The radio crackled to life. "Don't." Riley's voice, flat, absolute. I froze. My foot hovered. The bus kept rolling. The man in the suit watched me approach. As I got closer, I could see his face in the headlights. He was smiling, too wide. His lips stretched back past the point where smiles end, showing too many teeth. His eyes didn't blink. As the bus passed him, he raised his other hand and tapped on the side of the vehicle. Once, twice, 3 times. Tap, tap, tap. I watched in the side mirror. He stood under the streetlight, still smiling, watching the bus disappear. Then, between one glance and the next, he was gone. "Good," Riley said through the radio. "Very good. Maintain the schedule." My hands were welded to the steering wheel. My heart was trying to hammer its way through my ribs. I wanted to stop the bus, get out, walk away. But we were in the middle of nowhere, and dawn was still hours away, and I needed this job. I drove. The last 90 minutes were quiet. The passengers disembarked at their stops, one by one, walking off into the pre-dawn darkness toward places I couldn't see. By 4:30, the bus was empty. At exactly 4:47 a.m., I pulled into the turnaround at Terminal Road. The road ended 50 yards ahead at a chain-link fence. Beyond that, I could see the jagged edge where the bridge used to be, just a cliff dropping into nothing. "Open the rear emergency door," Riley said. I pulled the release. The door at the back of the bus swung open with a pneumatic hiss. "Return to your seat. Do not look back." I sat. I stared straight ahead at the fence, at the broken bridge, at the lightening sky. Behind me, I heard nothing. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing. At 4:52, the rear door slammed shut on its own. "Drive back to depot. Clock out before dawn." I drove. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't look at anything except the road ahead. I pulled into the depot parking lot as the sun broke the horizon, parked the bus in the garage, and stumbled into the dispatch office. The time clock was mounted on the wall, the old-fashioned kind with the punch cards. Mine was hanging in the slot marked 77B. I punched out 5:14 a.m. Callahan was gone. The office was empty. On the desk was an envelope with my name on it. Inside was more cash than I'd made in a month at my last job. I drove home in silence. My apartment was exactly as I'd left it, crumbling, cramped, but mine. I fell onto the bed fully clothed, still smelling like diesel and old bus upholstery. I fell asleep as the sun came up. I dreamed of tapping, 3 times. I didn't sleep the day after my first shift. I tried. I lay in bed staring at the water-stained ceiling, listening to my neighbor's television through the wall, and every time I closed my eyes, I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of knuckles on glass, the sound of something that wanted in. By 11 p.m., I was parked outside the depot again. The envelope of cash was in my glove box, still sealed. I'd counted it 3 times that morning, more money than I'd made in 2 months at the warehouse job in Albany. The job I'd lost after I'd shown up drunk and told my supervisor exactly what I thought of him, his family, and his managerial competence. The bridge I'd burned so thoroughly I'd had to leave the city. Nobody here knew about Albany. I'd left it off my application, left it off every application since. I needed this money. I needed this job. I told myself the first night had been exhaustion, stress, the kind of hallucination that comes from working graveyard shifts in an empty city. I told myself a lot of things as I walked into the depot. Callahan wasn't there. The dispatch office was empty except for the bulletin board with its faded photos and the time clock ticking on the wall. My punch card was in its slot. I clocked in at 11:53 p.m. and walked to the garage. Bus 77B sat in the same bay, engine cold, the paper schedule still bolted to the dash. I climbed into the driver's seat and the smell hit me immediately. Diesel, old upholstery, and that ozone smell underneath. The steering wheel was cold under my palms. I turned the key. The engine caught, the radio crackled. 77B, this is dispatch. Radio check. Riley's voice. Flat, genderless, efficient. This is 77B. I copy. Second shift. Same route, same rules. You understand? Yeah, I understand. Good. You were compliant last night. Maintain that standard. A pause. They notice patterns. They notice hesitation. Don't give them anything to work with. Who's they? The radio went silent for 3 seconds. Then, your first pickup is in 8 minutes. Follow the schedule. The line went dead. I pulled out of the depot at midnight sharp. The route was identical. Same streets, same sodium yellow lights, same sense of driving through a city that had died years ago, and nobody had bothered to remove the corpse. But I was different. I was alert now. My eyes moved constantly between the road, the schedule, and the big rearview mirror above my head. Every shadow on the sidewalk made my pulse spike. Every parked car could be hiding something that smiled too wide. The first passenger boarded at 12:17. An old woman with a grocery bag that looked like it had been packed in 1989. Wonder Bread visible through the thin plastic, a carton of eggs, a newspaper folded on top. She dropped her coin. The fare box registered. She sat 3 rows back and stared at nothing. At 12:34, a teenager boarded with a boombox balanced on his shoulder. Massive thing, covered in stickers, the kind nobody had carried since cassette tapes went extinct. He had headphones on. No music was playing. I could see the foam pads resting against his ears in complete silence. He sat near the back and didn't move. By 1 a.m., I had 6 passengers, and I'd started to notice what Riley meant. They were wearing the same clothes as last night. The old woman had the same grocery bag, the same newspaper. The teenager had the same boombox in the same position. A man in a factory uniform had the same grease stain on his left shoulder. They boarded at the same stops, sat in the same seats, exited at the same locations. They were stuck in a loop, playing out the same commute they'd been making the morning the bridge collapsed, the morning they died. I was driving a bus full of ghosts. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it was almost calming. Ghosts I could handle. Ghosts were predictable. They followed patterns. The man in the suit boarded at 1:14 a.m. I didn't recognize him immediately. He wasn't wearing the same suit from last night. This one was brown instead of gray. The tie was different. The shoes were scuffed instead of polished. But something about the way he moved made my hands tighten on the wheel. He dropped a coin. The fare box registered. He walked past me without making eye contact and sat in the middle of the bus, right side, 4 rows back. He pulled out a newspaper and opened it. I watched him in the rearview mirror. The newspaper was from 1989. I could see the date at the top, but the pages were wrong. Too white, too blank. He held it like he was reading, but there was no text, just empty pages. He never looked up, but I could feel him watching me through the paper. I counted stops obsessively. He'd boarded at Morrison and 12th, 3 stops. That was the rule. 3 stops and he exits. Morrison and 15th. He didn't move. Archer and Grand. He didn't move. Bellevue and Pine. 3rd stop. The bus hissed to a halt. The doors opened. 2 passengers got off. A woman with a lunch pail, a man with a briefcase. The man with the newspaper didn't move. I waited 10 seconds. He didn't stand, didn't fold his newspaper, didn't acknowledge that this was his stop. My throat was dry. The rule was clear. 3 stops, maximum. If they don't exit, you physically remove them. I stood. The bus felt smaller than it had a moment ago. I walked down the aisle, my boots loud on the rubber floor mat. The other passengers didn't look at me. They never looked at me. The man with the newspaper sat perfectly still. I reached his seat. Up close, I could see the back of his head, the way his hair was cut, the collar of his shirt. Normal. Completely normal. "This is your stop," I said. My voice sounded thin. He didn't move. "Sir, this is your stop. You need to exit." Slowly, so slowly, it felt like watching a video in slow motion. He folded the newspaper. The pages made no sound. He kept his head down, his face angled toward his lap. And then he whispered, "I know what you did in Albany." The air left my lungs. The bus felt like it tilted, like the floor had dropped 6 inches. My brain went into freefall because that was impossible. Nobody here knew about Albany. Nobody anywhere knew the details. I'd made sure of that. I'd left in the middle of the night, burned my phone number, cut contact with everyone I'd known there. "What?" I started. "You hit him," the man whispered, still not looking up. "The supervisor, you broke his nose, you broke his jaw. They didn't press charges because you left, because you ran, but you remember the sound his face made." My hands were shaking. I did remember. I remembered the crack of bone, the way he'd fallen, the blood on my knuckles. I remembered driving for 6 hours straight until I hit a city where nobody knew my name. "How do you—" The radio crackled. Riley's voice cut through, sharp and urgent. "Close the doors, now!" I stumbled backward. My hip hit a seat. The man with the newspaper still hadn't looked up. I made it back to the driver's seat, slammed my hand on the door control. The doors hissed shut. The bus sat at the stop, engine idling, my heart trying to break through my ribs. I checked the rearview mirror. The man had moved. He was 2 rows closer to the front, still sitting, still holding the newspaper. He'd moved while I was walking back, while my back was turned for 3 seconds. He'd ridden past 3 stops, and now he was closer. "Drive," Riley said through the radio. "Drive now." I drove. My foot pushed the accelerator harder than it needed to. The bus lurched into motion. I checked the mirror every 5 seconds. The man didn't move again, but I could feel his attention like a weight on the back of my neck. The next 2 hours were the longest of my life. Passengers boarded and exited on schedule. The echoes continued their loop, sitting quietly, staring at nothing, getting off at stops that led to empty lots and demolished buildings. But the man stayed. He sat 2 rows from the middle, holding his blank newspaper, and I knew he was watching me. At 3:47 a.m., a new passenger tried to board. We were stopped at Archer and 5th. The doors were open. An old man was exiting when I saw movement in the side view mirror. Someone else approaching the bus from an angle, not from the stop, from the street. They moved wrong, too smooth, too fast. "Unscheduled approach," Riley said immediately. "Do not open the rear doors. Do not acknowledge." The figure reached the bus. It was a woman, maybe 40, wearing clothes that could have been from 1989 or last week. She tapped on the side of the bus. Not the door, the window, right behind my head. Tap, tap, tap. I kept my eyes forward, hands on the wheel. The old man finished exiting. The doors were still open. The woman moved to the door, 1 foot on the bottom step. "Insufficient fare," I said. My voice was mechanical. "Please exit." She smiled at me. I could see it in the mirror beside my head. Smiled exactly like the man in the suit from last night. Too wide, too many teeth. "Close the doors," Riley said. I hit the button. The woman stepped back just before the doors closed. She stood on the sidewalk, still smiling, and watched the bus pull away. In the rearview mirror, the man with the newspaper had moved again, one row closer. By 4 a.m., my shirt was soaked with sweat. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel. Every muscle in my back was locked tight. The man was 4 rows from the front now. He'd moved 3 times while I'd been dealing with passengers, with stops, with the basic mechanics of driving. Each time I checked the mirror, he was closer. He still hadn't looked up from his blank newspaper. At 4:47 a.m., I pulled into the turnaround at Terminal Road. The broken bridge loomed in my headlights, the jagged edge where the road dropped into nothing. I pulled the rear emergency door release. The door swung open with its hydraulic hiss. "Do not look back," Riley said. "Standard purge protocol." I stared straight ahead. My hands were welded to the steering wheel. Behind me, I heard movement. Footsteps, the rustle of fabric. The passengers filing toward the rear door, walking out into the darkness toward the bridge that had killed them 37 years ago. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, from directly behind my seat, close enough I could feel breath on my neck, a whisper. "Tomorrow." Every hair on my body stood up. I didn't breathe, didn't move. In the rearview mirror, I could see him standing in the aisle behind me. He'd walked all the way to the front. His face was still angled down, but I could see his mouth. It was moving. "Tomorrow," he whispered again. "I'll know more tomorrow." The rear door slammed shut. I sat frozen for 5 seconds. Then, "Riley, the bus is clear. I'm heading back." Silence on the radio. "Riley?" More silence. Then finally, a crackle. But Riley's voice sounded different, strained. "You let him speak to you." My blood went cold. "What?" "Rule 7. The expanded protocols." Riley's voice was flat again, but something underneath it felt wrong. "If a passenger riding past 3 stops speaks directly to you and you respond, even 1 word, they gain permanent access to 1 memory per shift." My mouth went dry. That wasn't in the manual, that wasn't... It's in the addendum, bolted inside the farebox access panel. You were supposed to read it before your second shift. A pause. "You didn't check." I looked at the farebox. There was a metal panel on the side with 2 screws. I'd never noticed it, never thought to look. "He spoke to me," I said. My voice was shaking. He said, "And you responded. What? How do you engaged. Protocol states, do not speak to passengers riding past 3 stops. Do not acknowledge. Physical removal only. No verbal contact." You spoke to him. You gave him an anchor. I couldn't breathe. The bus felt like it was shrinking. What does that mean? It means he'll board tomorrow, and the next night, and the next, and every night, he'll know 1 more thing about you, 1 more secret, 1 more memory you don't want seen. Riley's voice crackled. "He'll learn you piece by piece until he knows you better than you know yourself, and when he does, he can wear you, like a coat." The parking brake was on. My hand was on the key. I couldn't move. Is there a way to... No. Once they have an anchor, they keep it. Rule 7 exists because this has happened before, to other drivers. That's why the addendum exists. That's why you were supposed to read it. A long pause. "Drive back to depot. Clock out before dawn. Tomorrow night he'll be waiting." The radio went dead. I sat in the empty bus at Terminal Road as the sky started to lighten. My hands were shaking. I thought about the man with the newspaper. I thought about Albany and the supervisor and the sound his face had made. I thought about all the other things I'd done, all the other secrets buried in my past, and I realized he was going to dig up every single one. I drove back to the depot in silence, parked, walked into the dispatch office on legs that barely held me. The time clock read 5:23 a.m. I punched out. My time card fell from my shaking hands. I had to pick it up twice. On the desk, another envelope. More cash than I'd made in months. I walked outside and threw up in the parking lot. The sun was coming up. The depot looked normal, boring, just another building nobody noticed. But I knew. Tomorrow night the man would board, and he'd know something new, something worse, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I drove home and sat in my apartment staring at the farebox access panel instructions I found folded in the envelope with my cash. Rule 7, Rule 8, Rule 9. A whole page of protocols Callahan had never mentioned. Rules I'd never been told. At the bottom, in faded typewriter ink, failure to read addendum is not grounds for contract termination. Consequences are driver's responsibility. I was being set up. I'd been set up from the beginning, and I had 4 more shifts until the week was over. 4 more nights with something that was learning to be me. I stood in the depot parking lot at 11:30 p.m., keys in my hand, staring at the garage door. I'd spent the entire day reading the addendum. Rules 7 through 12, typed on yellowed paper in that same faded typewriter ink. Each one worse than the last. Each one a trap I hadn't known existed. Rule 8. No physical contact with passengers. Skin-to-skin transfers intent. They can feel what you're thinking. Rule 9. If a hunter acquires a personal item, they can track you outside the route. I was wearing every piece of clothing I owned. My jacket was in my apartment, locked in a closet. My wallet was in my front pocket, checked every 5 minutes. I'd thrown away my watch, my ring, anything they could take. I should have walked away. I should have gotten in my car and driven until I hit a state where nobody knew my name and bus routes were just bus routes. But then Callahan appeared from the dispatch office. He didn't say anything, just walked up and held out an envelope, thicker than the others. Heavy. I took it. Looked inside. More cash than I'd made in 3 months at any job I'd ever held. He met my eyes for the first time. You read the addendum. It wasn't a question. Yeah. Good. They'll test you harder tonight. They know you know. He turned to walk back. But if you make it through, you're worth keeping. We lose most drivers by night 3. Where do they go? He stopped. Didn't turn around. Different places. Depends on which rule they broke. He kept walking. Clock out before dawn. I stood there with the envelope in my hand, with the weight of it, with the knowledge that they were paying me danger money. Suicide money. The kind of payoff that says, we know what we're asking, and we know most people can't do it. I put the envelope in my glove box and walked to the bus. The garage felt different, colder. The fluorescent lights buzzed at a different frequency, lower, meaner, the kind of sound that gets into your back teeth and vibrates there. Bus 77B sat in its bay, and the moment I stepped inside, I knew something was wrong. The seats felt rearranged. I couldn't point to what had moved. They were all in the same rows, same configuration, but the spaces between them felt different, narrower. The air was colder. Cold enough I could see my breath in the fluorescent spill from the garage. And when I climbed into the driver's seat and looked at the bolted schedule, there was a handwritten note in the margin I'd never seen before. In pencil, small, careful letters. They remember you now. My hands shook as I turned the key. The engine coughed twice before catching. The radio crackled immediately. 77B, this is dispatch. Riley's voice. But something was off, a tension underneath the usual flatness. This is 77B. I'm here. 3rd shift. You read the expanded protocols. Not a question, a statement. Yeah, I read them. Then you know what happens if you break them. A pause. Static. They're going to test you. Multiple vectors. Don't engage, don't respond, don't touch. Do you understand? I understand. No, Riley said. You don't, but you will. First pickup in 6 minutes. The line went dead. I pulled out of the depot at exactly midnight. The streets were darker than they'd been the previous nights. Half the streetlights were out, or maybe I was just noticing the gaps more. The bus felt heavier, like it was dragging something behind it. Every turn took more effort. Every stop sign felt like driving through mud. The first passenger boarded at 12:17, the old woman with the grocery bag. Same Wonder Bread, same eggs, same newspaper. She dropped her coin, plink, and sat in her usual seat. The teenager with the boombox boarded at 12:34, the factory worker at 12:51. The loop continued, but I could feel the difference. The air was charged, waiting. At 1:14 a.m., he boarded. The man from last night, the hunter with my memories. But tonight he was wearing a different face. Older, harder, with a scar above his left eyebrow I knew I'd never seen before but somehow recognized. He wore work clothes this time, jeans, flannel shirt, steel-toed boots. He dropped a coin. The fare box registered. As he walked past me, he leaned close, whispered, "You cried for 3 hours after Albany, in your car, in a gas station parking lot outside Syracuse." My chest locked up. That was true. That was exactly true. I'd never told anyone. I'd barely admitted it to myself. He sat in the same seat as before, middle of the bus, right side. He didn't pull out a newspaper this time. He just sat there, staring at the back of my head. I could feel his eyes like fingers pressing into my skull. I counted stops. Morrison and 15th, Archer and Grand, Bellevue and Pine. 3 stops. He stood and walked to the front exit without a word. As he passed my seat, he smiled. "Tomorrow," he whispered. "Tomorrow I'll know about the girl." The doors closed behind him. My hands were white-knuckled on the wheel. There had been a girl. In high school. Something I'd done that I'd spent 15 years trying to forget. He was digging through my life like a grave robber, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. At 1:47 a.m., the coordinated attack began. A woman boarded at Archer and 5th. Middle-aged, wearing a dress that could have been from 1989 or yesterday. She dropped a coin. I heard it, saw the counter tick, and immediately started crying. Not quiet tears, sobbing, gasping, choking sobs that filled the entire bus. "Please," she said, walking toward me. "Please don't make me get off. I'm scared. I'm so scared of the dark out there. Please." She was 3 feet from my seat, crying, reaching toward me with one hand. Every human instinct in my body screamed to comfort her, to say something, to help. I stared straight ahead. "Take your seat. Please, just one more stop. Just one more. Take your seat." She stood there for 5 more seconds, crying, hand extended. Then, like a switch flipped, she stopped. The tears vanished. Her face went blank. She walked to a seat and sat down. 3 stops. I counted obsessively. Morrison and 12th, Bellevue and Grand, Archer and Pine. At the 3rd stop, I stood, pointed at the door. "Exit," she smiled, the same too wide smile, but she got off, 1 down. At 2:03 a.m., an old man boarded. Hunched, shuffling, wearing a coat too heavy for the weather. He dropped a coin and started walking toward his seat. But as he passed me, he held out a folded piece of paper. "For you," he said. "You dropped this." My hand moved automatically, reaching for it. Muscle memory. Politeness. The radio exploded with Riley's voice. "No physical contact." I jerked my hand back like I'd touched fire. The paper fell. It hit the floor between us and unfolded. Blank. Completely blank. The old man looked at me. His eyes were wrong. Too dark. Pupils blown so wide there was no iris. He smiled and walked to his seat. My heart was trying to break through my ribs. I'd almost touched it. Almost taken something from a hunter's hand. Rule 8. Skin-to-skin transfers intent. I drove. My hands shook so badly the bus drifted in its lane. The old man sat 6 rows back, watching me. At 2:34 a.m., I heard the scream. High-pitched, terrified, real. It came from the back of the bus, from the seats near the rear door, where the echoes usually sat in quiet confusion. "Help! Someone help me!" A teenage girl. One of the echoes. I'd seen her before, headphones on, staring at nothing. But now she was standing in the aisle, her wrist held by something sitting behind her. I could see it in the rearview mirror. One of the hunters, wearing the face of a man in a business suit, gripping her arm with fingers that were too long, too pale. She was thrashing, trying to pull away. "Please, someone!" Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, to go back there, to help her. But Rule 3, if you turn around, they know you see them, and they're allowed to move closer. "Riley," I said into the radio. My voice cracked. "There's one of the echoes is drive," Riley said. "Flat, cold. It's a distraction. Keep driving." "She's screaming. She's already dead. She's been dead for 37 years. You can't save her. Drive." The screaming continued. I could hear it over the engine, over the hiss of the hydraulic doors, over the sound of my own breathing. I stared at the road ahead and drove and tried not to look in the mirror where I could see her struggling, see the thing holding her, see its mouth opening too wide. The bus was filling up. More passengers at every stop. I'd lost count. There were too many. More than the route should have. They packed the seats, stood in the aisles, pressed against each other in the narrow space between rows, and the girl kept screaming. At 3:12 a.m., I broke. I flipped the overhead lights on, just for a second, just to see, just to know what was real and what wasn't. The fluorescent strips flickered to life, and in that instant, I saw everything. The echoes were easy to spot, pale, translucent, confused. The old woman with her grocery bag, the teenager with his boombox, the factory worker, maybe 10 of them total, scattered through the bus like fading photographs. The rest were hunters, 20, maybe more. Their faces were wrong, features that shifted when I tried to focus on them, mouths that opened too wide, eyes that reflected the light like animals. They filled every seat, stood in every space. They'd been riding past their stops for the entire shift, getting closer with each violation I failed to enforce. And in the very back, sitting on the long bench directly behind the last row, was the man from my first 2 nights. He was wearing my jacket, the brown canvas one I'd left in the depot break room yesterday, hanging on a hook while I'd gone to the bathroom. He had it zipped up. He was smiling. In his lap was something small. My wallet, the one I'd checked 20 times tonight, the one that had been in my front pocket, except it was there, in his hands. He held it up so I could see it, and even from 40 feet away I could read my name on the driver's license visible through the plastic window. Then I hit the lights off. Darkness crashed back. The girl stopped screaming. The silence was worse. I couldn't breathe. They weren't hiding anymore. They'd ridden past their stops. They'd taken my jacket. They'd taken my wallet. Rule 9. If a hunter acquires a personal item, they can track you outside the route. I checked my pocket. My wallet was gone. I was wearing a t-shirt, no jacket. I'd left it. When had I left it? "Riley," I said. My voice was barely a whisper. "They have my wallet. They have..." "Drive to Terminal Road. Now." "I can't. There's too many..." I broke the schedule. I broke the lights rule. Drive. I drove. I stopped checking stops. Stopped watching the mirror. I just drove, foot heavy on the accelerator, the bus groaning as it picked up speed on the empty streets. Behind me, I could feel them. 20 things breathing in unison, standing in the aisle, getting closer. I hit Morrison without stopping. Blew past Archer and Grand with the doors closed. The schedule was meaningless now. I'd broken it. I'd broken everything. Riley was shouting through the radio. but I couldn't hear the words over the sound of breathing behind me, over my heartbeat, over the engine screaming as I pushed the bus past every safe speed. At 4:30 a.m., I pulled into Terminal Road. Too early. 17 minutes too early. I slammed the brakes. The bus skidded to a stop 30 feet from the chain link fence, from the broken bridge, from the drop, into nothing. I reached for the rear emergency door release. It wouldn't move. "Riley," I said, "the door, it won't open until 4:47. Purge protocol is time-locked." I looked in the rearview mirror. They were all standing now, 20 figures in the aisle, pressed shoulder to shoulder, facing forward, facing me. I could hear them breathing. In, out, in, out. Perfect synchronization. "Riley, I can't. They're right behind me. Sit still, don't move. Don't turn around. 17 minutes. I sat, my hands welded to the steering wheel, my back pressed against the seat. I could feel breath on my neck. Cold, rhythmic. 20 things breathing as one, inches behind me, waiting. 16 minutes. 15. The breathing got louder, closer. I could smell them now. Something like ozone and copper and meat left in the sun too long. 10 minutes. My shirt was soaked through with sweat. My muscles locked so tight I thought my spine would crack. I stared at the dashboard clock, watched the numbers tick over with glacial slowness. 5 minutes. Something touched my shoulder, just a fingertip, light, gentle, testing. "Don't react," Riley said. 4 minutes. 3. The fingertip traced down my spine. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood. 2. More touches, hands on my shoulders, my neck, my hair. Gentle, almost tender, like they were memorizing me. 1 minute. At exactly 4:47, the rear emergency door slammed open. The touching stopped. The breathing stopped. Behind me, I heard movement, shuffling, the rustle of fabric. They were filing out, slowly, one by one. "Don't look back," Riley said. I stared at the fence, at the broken bridge, at the sky starting to lighten at the edges. The footsteps continued, slow, deliberate, and then they stopped. Someone was standing at the rear door, not moving, not stepping out. "He's still there," I whispered. "One of them is still..." Wait. 10 seconds, 20, 30. Then I heard it. Something dropping on the floor behind me. Small, solid. The sound of leather hitting rubber. Footsteps. The last one exiting. The rear door slammed shut. I sat for 5 more seconds. Then I reached into my pocket. Empty. I turned. Just my head. Just a glance. And looked at the floor behind my seat. My wallet. Lying open. My driver's license visible. My face staring up from the plastic window. But it wasn't quite my face anymore. The eyes were wrong. Staring at something the camera couldn't see. I grabbed the wallet, shoved it in my pocket, and drove. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. Didn't check for stragglers. I just drove back to the depot as fast as the bus would go. I parked at 5:27 a.m., stumbled into dispatch, punched my card. Another envelope on the desk, heavier than last time. I made it to my car before my legs gave out. I sat on the pavement, back against the tire, and stared at my hands. They wouldn't stop shaking. I pulled out my wallet, checked the license again. My face, but the eyes. The eyes were looking past the camera, looking at something behind it. Something I couldn't see but remembered, suddenly and completely. They'd touched me. Rule 12, buried at the bottom of the addendum. Physical contact during purge protocol allows memory extraction. They'd touched my shoulders, my neck, my spine, and they'd pulled something out. Something I didn't even know I'd lost. I couldn't remember driving home. Couldn't remember unlocking my apartment. I sat on my couch as the sun came up and tried to figure out what was missing, but memory doesn't work like that. You can't notice a hole until you fall into it. At 11 p.m., I'd be back at the depot for night 4, with something wearing my jacket and holding my secrets and learning, piece by piece, how to be me. I found the wallet on the depot floor when I came back the next evening. I'd spent the entire day trying to figure out what memory they'd taken. I sat on my couch and mentally inventoried my past, childhood, adolescence, Albany, the years since, looking for gaps. But memory doesn't work like that. You can't see the holes until you fall into them. The wallet was lying in the middle of the dispatch office, right under the time clock, like someone had placed it there deliberately, waiting for me to find it. Everything was inside. Cash, credit cards, the receipt from the gas station where I'd filled up 2 days ago, and my driver's license visible through the plastic window. My face stared up at me, but the eyes were wrong. In every photo I'd ever taken, I looked at the camera, dead on, straight ahead. But in this picture, the same picture I'd had for 6 years, my eyes were focused past the lens, looking at something behind it, something I couldn't see but somehow remembered, something that had been there when the photo was taken, even though that was impossible. They'd changed the past, or I'd never noticed before, or I was losing my mind. I stood there holding the wallet for 5 minutes, trying to decide which option was worse. At 11:45 p.m., I walked to the garage. I should have been dead. Should have been taken during those 17 minutes at Terminal Road when they'd touched me, mapped me, pulled something essential out through my skin. But I was still here, still breathing, still walking toward bus 77B like I had a choice. The envelope from last night was in my car. I hadn't opened it. I didn't need to. I could feel the weight of it. Could feel what it was buying. One more shift. One more night of being the gatekeeper for things that wanted out. The bus was waiting in its bay, engine cold. The paper schedule bolted to the dash, except the schedule was different. I climbed into the driver's seat and stared at it. The usual stops, Archer and 5th, Bellevue and Grand, Morrison and 12th, were gone. Scratched out. Black ink scored through 15 locations, leaving the paper scarred. Only one stop remained, handwritten in the margin in that same careful pencil, 1247 Riverside Apartment, 3B. My address, my apartment. My hands were shaking as I turned the key. The engine coughed, caught, rumbled to life. The radio crackled immediately. 77B, this is dispatch. Riley's voice, but different, strained, like they were speaking from very far away. Riley, the schedule, it's not, I know. A pause, static. This is night 4, final shift. You made it farther than most. What's happening? They're calling in the debt. You broke 3 rules in one night: lights, schedule, purge protocol. That's enough to void your contract. Riley's voice cracked slightly. The bus is theirs now, for one shift, and they're coming for you. My throat was dust. What do I do? Drive, don't stop, don't open the doors, and if you get a chance, if you see an opening, break something they need more than you do. The radio hissed. I'm sorry. I can't help you anymore. I'm not allowed. The line went dead. I sat in the driver's seat in the cold garage with the schedule showing my home address and the weight of 3 nights of mistakes pressing down on my chest. I could get out, walk away, let them have the bus, the route, whatever they wanted. But I knew, the way you know things in nightmares, that they wouldn't stop at the bus. They had my wallet, they had my jacket, they had a memory I couldn't even identify as missing. They could track me now, find me, anywhere I went. The only way out was through. I put the bus in gear and drove. The streets were wrong immediately, too dark, too empty, like the city had been evacuated and nobody had told me. Every stoplight was green, every intersection was clear. The bus moved through the darkness like it was on rails, pulled toward that single address on the schedule. And at every corner, they were waiting. They boarded without stops, without ceremony. The doors opened on their own at intersections that weren't marked, and they filed on one by one. No coins dropped. The fare box stayed silent. They just walked past me and took their seats. Hunters. Every single one. No echoes tonight. No confused ghosts riding their loop. Just predators wearing human faces badly, their features shifting when I tried to focus on them. Mouths too wide, eyes too dark. They filled the bus in silence. Front to back, every seat, until there was no room left, and they stood in the aisles, packed shoulder to shoulder, breathing in perfect unison. And in the front seat, right behind the yellow line that said, "Do not cross while bus is in motion," sat the man from the previous nights, but he wasn't wearing a borrowed face anymore. He was wearing mine. Not a mask, not makeup. My actual face, my features, my scar above my left eyebrow from when I was 12, my crooked nose from the fight in Albany. He even had my expressions, the way my mouth turned down slightly when I was afraid, the way my eyes darted to the mirrors every few seconds. He was me, and I was sitting across from myself. He smiled, with my mouth, with my teeth. "You broke the lights rule," he said in my voice. Perfect inflection, perfect tone. The way I sounded on recordings that made me cringe. "You broke the schedule rule. You broke 3-stop. You let us touch you during purge protocol. You spoke to me when you should have stayed silent." I couldn't breathe. The steering wheel was slick with sweat under my palms. "You owe us a driver," he said. "Protocol is clear. A debt unpaid becomes a transfer. You belong to the route now. To us. Forever." The other hunters pressed closer. I could feel them at my back, breathing down my neck, their fingers inches from my skin. The radio crackled. Riley's voice barely audible through the static. "He's lying." The hunter wearing my face turned toward the radio. Tilted his head. My head. "Protocol 77G, Riley said. Their voice was strained, like speaking was causing physical pain. "A driver can transfer his route, once, to a willing replacement. You have to ask someone, out loud, before dawn." I looked at the dashboard clock. 4:23 a.m. Less than an hour until dawn. Less than an hour to find someone willing to take this route, this curse, this job that ate people from the inside out. "I don't have anyone," I said. My voice cracked. "I don't have family, no friends, nobody." "The depot," Riley said. "Call the depot. Ask for a replacement." My hand moved to the radio, but the hunter in my seat was faster. He reached out with my arm, my hand, and gripped the radio handset. Held it just out of reach. "No," he said in my voice. "You don't get to walk away. You're ours." The other hunters pressed closer, 20 sets of hands reaching for me. I could smell them, ozone and copper and decay. "Riley!" I shouted at the radio. "Riley, take the route. I'm asking. I need a replacement. Riley, please." Silence. Static. 5 seconds. 10. Then quietly, "I can't." My chest collapsed. "What?" "I can't take the route." Riley's voice sounded different now. Tired, ancient, hollow. "I already did. 23 years ago, I drove Route 77 for 8 months. Made it to my final shift. Thought I'd survived. But I didn't read the contract carefully enough." My hands were frozen on the wheel. "When a driver completes their term without finding a replacement, they don't get to leave," Riley continued. "They become part of the infrastructure, dispatcher, maintenance, records, whatever keeps the route running." A bitter laugh. "I've been the voice on this radio for 23 years, watching driver after driver take the job, watching them fail, watching them become passengers, or worse." "Then how do I—" "You can't ask me. I'm already bound. You need someone outside the system, someone who hasn't signed the contract, someone who chooses it willingly. Riley's voice cracked. But there's another way. Protocol 77G has a subsection, 77G4. If no replacement can be found before dawn, and the schedule is destroyed, the route becomes void. Everything bound to it, drivers, dispatchers, passengers, is released. Released? I said. I mean free or dead, depending on what we've become. Static. The schedule is the anchor. It's what keeps us here, what keeps them here. Destroy it, and we all go, including me. I looked at the bolted schedule, the yellowed paper with its single handwritten address. Riley, if I do this, do it, Riley said. I've been waiting 23 years for someone to ask the right question, for someone to realize the only way out is to burn the whole thing down. Their voice softened. I'm so tired. And I don't want to watch another driver disappear. End it. The hunter wearing my face lunged. Don't! I grabbed the schedule's plastic case and ripped it off the dashboard. The bolts tore free with a crack. The paper came loose in my hands, yellowed, decades old, the only map of a route that didn't officially exist. No! The hunter in my seat reached for me, but his hands couldn't grip the paper. You don't understand. The schedule is our anchor. Without it, I tore it in half. The bus lurched, not slowing, convulsing. The engine screamed. The hunters didn't scream. They gasped, a collective intake of breath like drowning victims breaking the surface. And then they began to come apart, not dissolving, not vanishing, unbinding. Their forms peeled away in layers, the stolen faces, the mimicked clothes, the borrowed humanity. What was underneath wasn't flesh or bone. It was something else, something older, patterns of light and shadow that couldn't hold shape without the schedule's framework to define them. They weren't dying. They were being released back to whatever place they'd been pulled from. The bus had been a trap for them too, a cage they'd been trying to escape by taking a driver as a key. The hunter with my face looked at me one last time. His features, my features, blurred and scattered like smoke. You freed us, he said, and I couldn't tell if it was gratitude or accusation. Then he was gone. They were all gone. The bus was empty except for the torn paper in my hands and the hum of the engine idling in the middle of an empty street. The radio crackled one last time. Thank you, Riley whispered. Their voice was fading, becoming static, becoming silence. 23 years, thank you for... The transmission cut out. The radio went dead. And I felt it, that Riley wasn't on the other end anymore. Wasn't anywhere. The schedule had been their anchor too. The bus coasted to a stop. The engine died. Outside, the sky was lightening, that gray-blue color that comes before dawn. I could hear birds starting to sing. I sat in the driver's seat with torn paper in my hands and tried to remember how to breathe. After a minute, I got out, left the bus in the middle of the street, walked to the depot as the sun broke the horizon. The building looked smaller in daylight. Ordinary, just another forgotten piece of city infrastructure. I found my time card and punched out 5:38 a.m. The last envelope was on the desk. I left it there. I'd earned enough. More than enough. I walked away and didn't look back. 6 months later, I was working construction in a different state. Good pay, normal hours, co-workers who asked normal questions. I cashed the paychecks from Route 77, paid off my debts, got an apartment with working heat and water that didn't smell like rust. I didn't take buses anymore, didn't go near depots, tried not to think about that week in my life that felt more like a nightmare than a memory. Most nights I slept fine. The dreams faded. The paranoia eased. But sometimes, late at night, I'd find myself near bus stops, watching the passengers board, watching the buses pull away into the darkness, looking for faces that shifted, for smiles that stretched too wide. I never saw them. The hunters were gone. Riley was gone. The route was gone. I'd torn the schedule and everything bound to it had been released, freed or destroyed. I'd never know for sure. Until one night in October, walking home from a bar, I saw a city bus pass me on the street. Just a regular route, regular schedule. The interior lights were on. I could see the passengers, normal people, tired from their shifts, staring at their phones. And in the very back, sitting on the long bench, I saw him. The man from the route, wearing my old canvas jacket, still wearing my face. He looked exactly like me. He saw me on the sidewalk, smiled, raised one hand and tapped on the window. Once, twice, 3 times. The bus kept moving. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, watching it disappear around a corner. My heart was hammering, my hands were shaking, because I'd torn the schedule, I'd freed them, I'd ended it. Unless I hadn't, unless tearing one schedule just meant they found another route, another bus, another city. Unless the hunters weren't bound to Route 77, they were bound to the night, to the threshold between the living world and whatever lay beyond it. And buses, any buses running graveyard shifts in forgotten parts of any city, were doors they could slip through. I walked faster, got to my apartment, locked every door, checked every window. I didn't sleep that night, and I knew, the way you know things in nightmares, that I hadn't destroyed them. I just cut them loose. The schedule had been a leash, not a prison. Now they were everywhere. I never looked back at a bus again, never made eye contact with passengers, never answered when someone asked me for directions to any depot in any city. Because some routes don't end, they just find new drivers, and I'd already done my shift. I took the job because Miguel called me 3 times in 1 week. That was pretty much it. The first call I let go to voicemail. The second I picked up and told him I didn't have it. The third time he just called, waited for my voice to finish, and hung up. That was Tuesday. By Thursday, I had a job listing open on my phone and my thumb hovering over Apply Now for the second time that morning, and it didn't feel like a decision so much as the last off-ramp before the highway ran out. The listing was short. Night auditor. Small motel, Route 25 corridor, New Mexico. $12.50 per hour, full-time nights. No experience required. Must be reliable, able to work alone, comfortable with limited supervision. The last line was the one that got me. Immediate start, housing consideration for right candidate. Elena was $2,300 behind on rent. I knew this because Miguel, her landlord, had my number from 2 years ago when I had co-signed her lease as a favor. At the time, it had seemed reasonable. She was my older sister. She'd just moved to Truth or Consequences to start over after a rough stretch. The apartment was cheap and she had a coffee shop job lined up. I was working retail management, making actual money for once, and the co-signing felt like the kind of thing a decent brother does when he's the one who finally has his feet under him. That retail job was gone now. My feet were not under me, but Miguel still had the number. "She hasn't paid since October," he said, the third time. I was standing in Aaron's kitchen at 7 in the morning, watching the coffee maker drip. October. That's 3 months. I need somebody to talk to her, or I start the filing. I'll talk to her. Talking doesn't pay rent. I know that, Miguel. If she's out, you're responsible for the balance. That's the cosign. I knew that too. I said goodbye and sat on Erin's couch with my mug until I pressed the Apply Now button. The phone interview was 2 days later. The woman on the other end sounded like she hadn't slept in several years, that particular flatness that comes from being very competent at something for a long time. She asked if I was comfortable working alone overnight. I said yes. She asked about front desk experience. I told her 4 years in retail management. She asked about transportation. I said I could figure it out. The motel is half a mile off I-25, she said. Closest town is 17 miles north. You arrange your own arrival and departure. No housing provided, but there's a break room cot if you occasionally need to stay over. That's fine. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. One training night with me, then you're on your own. The job has specific procedures, written down. You follow them exactly. She offered me the job before she said goodbye. I wasn't sure if that was because I was the right fit or because no one else had applied. Erin's cousin Mateo drove me down on a Friday evening in November, which meant it was full dark by the time the exit appeared. The sign came up in the headlights like a punchline. Super 8, the red and yellow weathered to pink and beige by however many New Mexico summers. The ramp curved down, and then there was nothing on either side. Flat scrub desert, the hiss of the highway fading behind us, and then the parking lot came into view. 6 cars. Orange sodium lights on tall poles that made everything look wrong, like a photograph taken with bad film. The building was beige-yellow, 2 stories, a long rectangle with exterior walkways on both floors. The pool enclosure on the north side was chained closed. The vending machines near the side entrance glowed blue-white in the dark. Mateo stopped at the edge of the lot and looked at it. "You good?" he said. "Yeah." I grabbed my backpack. "I can wait." "Mateo, I'm fine." I got out and shouldered the bag. "Thanks for the ride." He waited until I was inside before he pulled out. I heard his tires, then the highway sound fading, then nothing except the AC unit above the entrance rattling its steady rattle. I stood in the lobby doorway and looked back at the parking lot and the desert beyond the orange lights. No other building in any direction, no gas station glow, no radio towers blinking. Just flat land and a black sky full of stars, and this one building sitting in the middle of it, like someone had picked up a normal roadside motel and dropped it here by mistake. I went inside. Diane Porter was behind the front desk when I came in. Late 40s, blazer over a dark blouse, hair pulled back. She was looking at the computer screen and didn't glance up immediately. Not rude, just operating at her own pace and not pretending otherwise. "Danny Vasquez," I said. "I know." She looked up, took me in with a quick settling assessment. "You're early. Good. We have a lot to cover." The training moved fast. She walked me through the property management system. Check-in, check-out, audit reports, room status flags. The key card machine, which was older than anything I'd used in retail and needed a second tap sometimes to encode. The back office with 6 camera monitors. Parking lot, both walkway levels, breakfast room, back lot near the ice machine and dumpsters, the laundry room, the supply closet, the lockbox mounted flush on the wall behind the desk. "Master key lives in there," she said, tapping it. "Gray metal, combination dial, key lock. You don't open it between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., not for any reason. What if a guest is locked out? Re-encode their key card. 30 seconds. That's what the machine is for. What if there is no situation between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. where you need the master key? Every question about the master key has the same answer. Re-encode the card." Her tone was settled, the way facts are settled, not harsh, just done negotiating. She showed me the breakfast room. Toaster, coffee station, a chest freezer along the back wall. She didn't mention the freezer. I didn't ask. At 10:45, she stopped at the front desk and pulled a laminated sheet from beneath the counter. She set it down between us and smoothed it flat. Protocol PCRC 788. Threshold Entity Containment. Motel Variant. A numbered list. 9 items. I started reading. Out loud, Diane said. I looked at her. She watched me without expression. I read it out loud. Rule 1. No walk-ins after 11:11 p.m. Tell them we're fully booked. Don't check the system. Don't offer alternatives. Rule 2. If the phone rings 3 times, stops, then rings twice more within 30 seconds, do not answer. Let it go to voicemail. Do not listen to the voicemail. Rule 3. Room 209 stays empty every night regardless of what the system shows. If a guest claims they booked it, reassign them, comp the first night, do not go in for any reason. Rule 4. Between 1:13 and 1:26 a.m., do not look at mirrors or reflective surfaces, eyes forward if you need to move. Rule 5. If a guest requests towels between midnight and 6 a.m., deliver exactly 1, no extras, no asking how many they need. Rule 6. Master key stays in the lock box. Don't open between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Don't give it to anyone. Rule 7. If something on the security monitor looks directly at a camera, cover the screen with the black cloth immediately. Don't look again for 30 minutes. Don't rewind footage. Rule 8. If someone offers a key card from another hotel, freeze it in the ice machine out back. Don't return it. Don't ask questions. Rule 9. If you receive any communication from Diane Porter after 2 a.m., do not respond. When I finished, I set the sheet down. There was a black cloth folded in the monitor alcove that I hadn't noticed before. Some of these are normal, I said. Lock procedures, towel counts. Some of these are not. No, she agreed. The one about the mirrors. Yes. And the last one. About you. After 2 a.m., I'm asleep at home, 30 miles from here. I don't contact night staff after 2 a.m. for any reason. A pause. If you get a text from my number, a call, anything, after 2 a.m., it isn't me. Treat it accordingly. I held that for a moment. Outside, the highway was a faint sound like breathing. Is this a hazing thing? I said. For new hires? She picked up her blazer and shrugged into it. Follow these rules exactly as written. Every night. Not approximately. Exactly. She picked up her travel mug. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm telling you how it is. She was gone by 11. I watched her headlights sweep the lobby windows and vanish south, and then there was nothing but the AC rattling and the clock on the computer reading 11:01 p.m. I sat in the desk chair and looked at the laminated sheet and the monitor bank and the empty lot on the 6 screens. I told myself it was a joke, an elaborate bit passed down through a chain of night auditors, growing more detailed each time. The protocol number was a nice touch. Someone had put in the work. 8 hours. I had 8 hours to get through, and then I could decide in daylight whether I was coming back. I pulled up the audit screen, found the reconciliation function, and started reading through the procedure steps. By 11:10, I had the system mostly figured out and a legal pad with notes on the parts I'd need to revisit. I made a cup of the bad lobby coffee and sat back down. The list sat on the counter. I read it again without meaning to. Then again. I was on the 3rd pass when something knocked on the glass front doors. 2 knocks, deliberate, the sound of knuckles against double-paned glass. I looked up. She was standing outside. Early 30s, I'd guess. Blonde hair pulled back, dark windbreaker, holding a dead phone in both hands with the flat, helpless posture of someone whose battery had just quit. She looked cold. She looked like she'd been driving and had a problem, and the obvious next move was for the person behind the desk to open the door. I was halfway around the desk before I checked the clock. 11:14 p.m. Rule 1. No walk-ins after 11:11 p.m. I stopped. My hand was 3 inches from the door handle. The woman hadn't moved. She was watching me through the glass with mild expectation, the patient look of someone waiting for the obviously correct thing to happen. My heart was doing something unpleasant. I looked at the time, then at the laminated sheet on the counter, then back at her. I pointed at the sheet. The gesture felt absurd, pointing at a piece of laminated paper as an explanation, but I didn't know what else to do. She watched my hand, then looked at my face. Her expression didn't change. That was the first wrong thing. People waiting at a door that doesn't open. They react, they frown, or look confused, or try the handle. She did nothing. That mild expectation just flattened out like something switching off behind her eyes. She breathed on the glass, leaned forward slightly, exhaled through her nose, and a cloud of fog spread across the door's surface in a wide, uneven oval. In the center of the fog, pressed against the glass from the outside, was a handprint. Her hands were at her sides. The handprint was enormous, each finger 7 or 8 inches long. The palm the size of a dinner plate, the kind of hand that shouldn't belong to a human being, pressed flat and clear as a signature against the glass. She turned and walked. Not quickly, not slowly. A straight line along the exterior of the building, past the first window and the second, her profile moving through the orange light and then past the edge of the glow. At the scrubland where the asphalt ended, she was simply gone. Not a dramatic vanishing. The dark just didn't have her in it anymore. The handprint was still on the glass. The fog around it was already fading. The print remained. I looked at the clock. 11:14 p.m. The whole thing had taken 2 minutes. I sat back down in the desk chair. My coffee was still warm. I wrapped both hands around it and looked at the fading print and thought about several things, carefully and in order, and came to no conclusions. The phone rang at 11:17. 2 rings, a stop, then 1 ring. I counted the pattern without touching it. Not rule 2, that was 3 rings. Pause, 2 rings, but close enough that my hand stayed in my lap. The reservation system chimed 30 seconds later with the pleasant sound it made for new bookings. I looked at the screen. New reservation. Arrival tonight. 11:17 p.m. Name field, blank. Room 209. I sat very still. Then I pulled up room management and flagged 209 as out of order. Maintenance required, do not assign. The system accepted the change. I went back to the reservation screen. The reservation was gone. Not canceled, gone. No cancellation notice, no modified status, no entry in the change log. The screen showed the same check-in list it had shown before the chime, with 209 flagged out of order and everything else as it had been. Like it had never been there. I looked at the blank space on the screen where the name field had been. I looked at the handprint on the glass, nearly invisible now, the fog completely gone. The print itself, 5 long lines and a wide palm, was still faintly there, would probably be there until someone cleaned the glass. I turned back to the audit screen and got back to work. 11:22 p.m., 6 hours and 38 minutes left. I kept my eyes off the glass. The first hour was the hardest part, and then midnight came and reset the clock. I'd spent the stretch between 11:22 and midnight doing the audit work, reconciling checkouts, running the nightly balance, logging the 2 guests already checked in. Room 108, a trucker named Reeves, wake-up call at 5, paid cash. Room 214, reservation under C. Alderman, 1 night, no car in the lot I could match to the name. I noted that and moved on. The work was simple once you understood the rhythm. Watch things on screens, write them down. At 11:50 I walked the ground floor, side exit locked, deadbolt thrown. Laundry room, 2 machines idle, One forgotten load, dry in the drum. Supply closet. 23 towels on the shelf, folded in thirds. No load needed. I went back to the desk. The AC hummed. The desert outside the windows was dark. The motel was too far off the highway for traffic noise to carry. There were stretches of the last hour where I'd completely forgotten the road existed. I sat with the rule sheet on the counter, and the 6 camera feeds running and the clock ticking over to midnight, and I ran the camera check. Parking lot. 6 cars, no movement. Both walkways, empty. Breakfast room, empty. Back lot, ice machine running, dumpsters, desert beyond the floodlights. The handprint was still on the front glass, visible on the lobby feed, 5 faint smears catching the sodium light at a low angle. I was still watching the backlot monitor when the front doors opened. I heard it before I saw it. The hydraulic exhale of the door mechanism, the sound it only makes when the door actually swings. I looked up. A man was already inside, standing 6 feet from the front desk with his hands loose at his sides, wearing green hospital scrubs and a lanyard with a badge clipped to it. He hadn't knocked. He wasn't coming through the door the way people come through doors. He was just there, the way furniture is there. Evening. Stephen Thompson, County EMS, got a report of a gas smell at this location. Need to do a quick sweep of the rooms. I looked at his badge. The photo was blurred, not scratched, not water damaged. The image itself was indistinct, every feature smeared just enough that you couldn't hold any of it. The name read Stephen Though, and then the plastic went wrong, ink spreading sideways like it had gotten wet from the inside and never dried. I haven't smelled anything, I said. That's normal at low concentrations. You'd only smell it once it was already dangerous. He smiled, assembled correctly. If you give me the master key, I can do a room-by-room check and be out of your way in 20 minutes. Rule 6. I can't give out the master key, I said. Motel policy. This is a safety situation. I'm authorized to request access. I'll call the fire department, I said. They can coordinate with you. Something happened to his face, not a change I could name, more like the light behind it went somewhere else. The smile was still technically there, still arranged correctly, but whatever had been running, it stepped back, and what was left was a face with no one in it. The same quality the woman at the door had had when I'd pointed at the rule sheet. You always this difficult? Pretty much. He stood for a few more seconds. His eyes made a slow scan of the lobby that ended at the hallway behind the desk and stopped there. Then he turned and walked out. In the parking lot, he moved in a straight line, past the cars, past the sodium lights, past the pavement's edge. He walked into the desert scrub at the same pace he'd crossed the lobby, without slowing at the point where the asphalt ended. The dark took him. Same path as the woman. Nearly the same line. I wrote 1203, scrubs, master key request, refused, departed on the legal pad. Added, same path as 1114 woman. I underlined it and looked at it for a moment. The desk phone rang at 12:37. 1 ring, stop, 2 rings. Not rule 2, that was 3 stop 2. Close, but not the pattern. The message light blinked once and went dark. I didn't listen to the voicemail. The call for towels came in at 12:51. The guest line lit up. Room 214. I picked up. Towels. 1 word, nothing after it. The voice was flat in a way I was starting to recognize. Not the flatness of someone too tired to bother with courtesy, but something more fundamental. A voice with nothing particular behind it. Sure, be right up. 1 towel from the supply closet, folded in thirds, still warm from the dryer vent heat running through the shelf. I held it under my arm and called the elevator. The second floor smelled different, heavier, damper, like air that had been enclosed for a long time. The lights ran yellow up here, the quality of bulbs close to the end of their life. I stepped out and started down the hall, Same doors, same placards, same carpet gap at each threshold. The AC units between rooms held their continuous hum. The door was open an inch, not half latched, deliberately open, held that way. A thin, dark line between the door and the frame. Cold came through that inch, not conditioned air. Something older and deeper, root cellar cold, the cold of a space that had been cold for a long time and had no intention of warming. And underneath it, a smell. Lake water, algae, the dark, organic mud smell of standing water that never sees direct light. I kept walking, eyes forward, not slowing. 211, 213. I knocked on 214. A pause of 5 or 6 seconds. The door opened 6 inches. A hand came through. Pale, not sick, pale, but a settled, deliberate absence of color. Narrow fingers, 7 or 8 silver rings on them. Plain, identical bands, no stones, stacked from the base, knuckle upward. The weight of that many rings on one hand should have been visible in how it moved. The hand moved like it didn't notice. I placed the towel in the hand. The fingers closed slowly, with a precision that didn't look like taking a towel so much as confirming a transaction had been completed correctly. The hand withdrew. The door latched. No face, no voice after the one word on the phone. I stood in the hallway for a moment. My heart was doing the thing it had been doing since 11:14, just fast enough to notice. Then I checked my phone. 1:12 a.m. Rule 4 in 60 seconds. I looked up. At the far end of the hall, the narrow horizontal window faced the exterior walkway. In daylight, it would let in sky. At 1:12 in the morning, with yellow lights behind me, it was black glass, a mirror. I could see the hallway in it, the line of doors, the ceiling, the carpet, and me standing outside 214 with my phone in my hand. 113. I dropped my gaze to the carpet and started moving. 213, 211. The cold gap of 209 coming up on my right. I felt it before I reached the door, a 3-foot band of cold air, like stepping through a threshold in empty air, the lake water smell with it. I held my breath until I was through, counted 3 steps, exhaled. Behind me something moved, not footsteps, a heavy drag, then a shifting, furniture moved by something that didn't need to be careful about noise, a clunk, another drag, then a long scrape along the wall that tracked parallel to my movement and kept pace with me. I kept my eyes on the carpet and walked faster. I found the stairwell door by feel, shoulder pushed through it. Concrete and dust. Ordinary building smells, the kind that don't mean anything. 1 flight down, ground floor door, through it. 1:15. 2 minutes inside the window. Back at the desk, I put my phone face up on the counter and kept my eyes on anything flat and matte. The rule sheet, the keyboard, the legal pad. The sounds from upstairs had stopped when I hit the stairs. I wrote 113 to 115, second floor, sounds during Rule 4 window, tracking, and underlined it once. 126. Window closed. I let out a breath I'd been managing in careful increments for 13 minutes. At 1:27, I checked the monitors. 5 feeds clear. The 6th, back lot, showed Jane and Thompson. I'd given the woman the name Jane in my head because she needed one. She and Thompson were standing between the dumpsters, facing each other at about 4 feet. Mouths closed, arms at their sides. The stillness of objects placed in a room, not of people choosing to stand. At exactly the same moment, simultaneously, not one then the other, both of them turned and looked directly at the camera, not at the monitor, at the lens. They tilted their faces upward to find it at the same moment with the same precision, and the screen did something I couldn't call a glitch or static. It was more like the image briefly stopped being a recording and became something else. A window rather than a monitor, with something on the other side doing the looking. I grabbed the desk blotter and covered the monitor. Rule 7 said black cloth. The cloth was in the alcove 12 inches from the screen, which was 12 inches more than I was willing to get to a screen that was doing that. The blotter was matte green cardboard and it covered the feed completely. I pressed it flat and wedged it against the housing. 1:29, 30 minutes of blind monitoring. I looked at the ceiling and thought about what was probably still happening on that feed. Then I decided I was fine not knowing. I'd seen enough. At 1:38, the phone rang twice, stopped, then once, two-stop one. Still not Rule 2. Message light blinked, went dark. I didn't touch it. Something slid under the back office door. Pushed slowly, deliberately. The motion of something guided rather than dropped. A white-faced rectangle of plastic, keycard dimensions came through the door gap and settled about a foot inside the office. No sound of anything pulling back, no shadow in the gap below the door. I used a pen as a lever, Best Western Albuquerque, standard logo, magnetic stripe on the back, one diagonal scratch across it. Rule 8. I carried it on the pen to the breakfast room, lifted the freezer lid, rows of key cards, sorted by brand the way you sort things you've been adding to over a long time. Holiday Inn Express on the left, maybe 15 deep. Motel 6 in the center, Marriott, Best Western. 2 brands I didn't recognize, laid flat, face up, organized with a care that implied months of additions. Years, possibly. 40 cards, maybe 50, each one a flat rectangle of cold plastic with a hotel name on it. I placed the Best Western card in its column and lowered the lid. I stood with my hand on the freezer for a moment, doing the math. 40 cards minimum. 40 separate nights of someone doing exactly what I'd just done, picking up a card with a pen, walking it here, placing it in the correct column. Someone had been building these rows long before I showed up. Someone had sorted them, maintained them, kept the columns neat. I went back to the desk. At 1:59, the phone rang 3 times. Stopped. Then twice more. I sat with my hands in my lap and counted each ring and counted the pause. 3. Stop. 2. Within 30 seconds of the stop. Rule 2. Exact pattern. I did not answer. I watched the message light blink on and I did not move toward the phone. 30 seconds later, the front door handle moved. Not the door, the lever handle on the interior side. Up, hold, down. Then again, up, hold, down. The motion of someone working it from outside, but the lock wasn't turning and the door wasn't moving. Just the handle, cycling through the same motion 3 more times at even intervals. Then it stopped. I wrote the time, 2 a.m. Drew a line under it. My phone buzzed. Text, name on the screen, Diane Porter. Hey, sorry to bother you. Can you check the fire extinguisher mount by room 214 when you get a chance? Front desk reported it was loose last week and I forgot to follow up. Shouldn't take more than a minute. Time on my phone, 2:04 a.m. Rule 9. I was already moving toward the elevator, some cooperative employee reflex that processes a reasonable request before the rest of your brain catches up. I got to the edge of the lobby and stopped. I went back to the desk, photographed the rule sheet. All 9 rules, full page, sharp enough to read every word. Sent it to Diane's number with no message, just the image. 20 seconds. My phone buzzed. A photo, taken from above and behind the front desk, angled down from near the ceiling behind the monitor bank. In it, the desk chair faced the dark hallway. Someone sat in the chair, head forward, eyes closed, hands loose in the lap. Same gray hoodie, same dark jeans. My backpack on the floor to the left of the chair, logo facing up. Timestamp, 2:03 a.m. I was standing, both hands on the phone, fully awake at the front edge of the desk. I turned and looked at the chair, empty, facing the lobby, the way I'd left it when I stood up. In the photo, the chair faced the hallway. I looked at the photo for a long time. My hands went cold, not from anything in the room, just cold, the blood deciding it had somewhere else to be. I blocked the number, sat down in the chair, facing the lobby, and put both hands flat on the desk. 2:07 a.m. 4 hours and 53 minutes left. The message light was still blinking. The photo was still on my phone at 2:07 a.m. when I put both hands flat on the desk and tried to think clearly. The message light blinked its patient red rhythm. I didn't touch it. I'd let Rule 2 stand at 1:59. I was going to let the voicemail sit. What I needed was to keep following everything else, get to 7 a.m., collect a check, and never come back. I sat with that plan for about 3 minutes before the lights changed. Not off, not a power failure. They dimmed, exactly halfway, as if someone had found a dimmer switch somewhere and settled it at 50% and held it there. The room changed with it. What had been ordinary fluorescent pallor became something closer to the light in a place where the walls are pressing inward. The shadows in the hallway behind the desk deepened. The breakfast room doorway went dark enough that I couldn't see the back counter. The AC stopped, mid-cycle, not winding down, cut off between one moment and the next. The silence it left behind had mass. Then I heard the footsteps. Down the hallway from the direction of the breakfast room or somewhere further back past the area the cameras covered. Slow footsteps, careful ones. The particular pace of something that moves how it wants to move, not how the situation requires. One step, a pause long enough to breathe through, then another. I looked at the ground floor hallway monitor, the corridor feed that covered the path from the back of the building to the front desk area. Empty carpet, empty walls, the laundry room door closed at the far end, the timestamp ticking correctly in the corner. Nothing in the frame moving. The footsteps kept coming. I could hear the carpet compressing under each one, that soft, dense sound of weight pressing motel carpet down, the individual fibers flattening. Under it, a faint creak of floorboard, the building settling under something heavy, moving slowly across it. 20 feet out and getting closer, and the camera between us showed nothing but corridor. I had stopped breathing sometime around the third step. I made myself take a slow, controlled one. The salt packets were in the breakfast room, a wire caddy on the coffee station counter, the kind that holds single-serve packets of salt and pepper and sugar for the free breakfast that ran from 6 to 9, and that I'd never see because I was going to be gone by then. My mother had kept salt on the thresholds of every door in the house I grew up in, fresh every winter, re-poured after anything unusual. My grandmother's position was that there were things you kept outside, and that salt was how you reminded them of the boundary. I'd always thought of it as the kind of old belief that doesn't survive contact with the actual world. That night, I thought of it as the only thing available to me, so I moved. Fast through the breakfast room doorway, to the counter, 11 packets in the caddy. I took all of them and went back to the office threshold, the doorway between the front office and the lobby corridor, and I tore them open one by one, pouring a continuous line across the full width of the opening. My hands were steadier than I had any right to expect. The line wasn't thick, 11 packets was barely enough for thin, but it was unbroken from one side of the frame to the other. I finished the last packet and stood up. The footsteps stopped. I waited at the office side of the line, listening. 5 seconds. 10. The hallway was fully still, but the air on the other side of the threshold was different than the office air, cooler by several degrees, heavier, carrying that faint organic note I'd been cataloging since the second floor. Lake water, still and airless, something that had no business being in a carpeted corridor off I-25. Then the footsteps started again, slower this time, a deliberate approach, right to the office door, stopping close. Close enough that if there had been a person on the other side, I would have been able to hear them breathing. I couldn't hear breathing. I put my back against the wall beside the desk. The doorknob turned, slowly. The latch cylinder rotating in its housing, the mechanism engaging, moving toward the point of release. It reached where the door would have swung clear of the frame, and stopped. The salt line held. The door didn't move. The knob returned to neutral. A pause. Then it turned again, harder this time, a full rotation, the door rattling in its frame from the force applied to it. Still didn't open. From the other side came something that was not quite impact and not quite pressure. Something large applying itself to the surface all at once, the frame shuddering with it. The salt line held. From further down the hall, a low vibration moved through the air before it became sound. Then it became sound. Then it became a voice. Danny, Diane Porter's voice. The match was exact. Not close, not approximate, exact. The tone she used when she was being careful and efficient and slightly worried. The cadence she had when she said something once and expected it to register. I'd heard it for 3 hours during training, and I would have known it anywhere. Danny, it's Diane. Let me in. I didn't answer. I didn't move my feet. I know you followed the rules. That was right. You did the right thing. A measured pause, the length and placement of it correct for the person it was impersonating. But something happened tonight that's outside what the rules cover. I need to be in there with you to sort it out. Just open the door. The salt was blackening. Not all at once, from the right end of the line progressively toward the left, as if something invisible was moving along it from outside and leaving a dark trace where it made contact. The white granules going dark in a slow advance, the way moisture travels through sand, except nothing I could see was producing it. Your sister, said quietly, the way you say the thing you know will land. Elena. She's $2,300 behind. Miguel keeps calling you. A pause. I know what's in your account, Danny. $38 and change. The exact amount. Not approximately, exactly. $38 and the change I hadn't bothered to track because it didn't matter when you only had 38. Open the door, and none of it has to be a problem. I can sort out the money situation from where I'm standing. The voice had shifted by a fraction, not wrong enough to locate precisely, but slightly off the way. A recording of a voice sounds different from the voice itself, the difference between the real thing and a very good copy of it. The rules are for normal nights. Tonight is not a normal night. Things got out of hand. I'm trying to help you. The salt was 2/3 black. I looked at the line and I looked at the door, and I kept my mouth shut and my feet still, and I breathed slowly. Then the voice moved, repositioned from the hallway to the lobby, same voice, no transition, just present somewhere else, and the register shifted again. Diane's voice on the surface and something running underneath it at a frequency that belonged to neither voices nor machines. The freezer, running at those two levels simultaneously, top and bottom, one of them language and one of them something older than language. You were supposed to keep the freezer full. That was your whole job. The cards stay frozen. That was all you had to do. I moved before I finished processing it. Over the salt line, through the door, into the hallway, turning toward the breakfast room. The voice kept talking, but I wasn't listening to it anymore. I grabbed a trash bag from under the counter. I crossed to the freezer and threw the lid up. Cold hit me across the face. I reached in with both hands. I didn't try to be careful. I scooped in handfuls, Holiday Inn, Motel 6, Marriott, the two unrecognized brands, all of them cold and slick, and dumped them into the bag. Then another handful. The sorted columns I'd noted at 138 dissolved. I didn't care about the organization. The whole left side Holiday Inn stack, the Motel 6 center, the Best Western with the new card I'd added on top. I ran my palms along the freezer bottom to catch anything that had slid loose to the edges. The last card was a Holiday Inn Express. Logo worn from years in the cold, the red faded to a dull orange. It was from somewhere in Texas. The address partly visible on the back. It hit the bottom of the bag. The building erupted. Lights to full brightness and beyond. Every fluorescent burning past its rated output, bleaching the surfaces, flattening every shadow. The ice machine outside shrieked at a volume I hadn't known it was capable of, a sustained roar coming through the back wall. Upstairs, doors slamming down the second-floor corridor, one after another, the percussion of them landing hard in sequence. The front doors rattled in their frame. The elevator dinged, once, then again immediately, then again and again in a loop. the display cycling floors with nothing calling it. The voice in the lobby laughed, not Diane's laugh, not using Diane's voice anymore. Several registers lower, flat, the sound of something that has been patient for a very long time and has given up on patience. It was built from the architecture of a laugh, same shape, same duration, but the material was wrong all the way through. The rules only kept you useful. No raised voice, just fact. Every card in that freezer, cold and ready. That was your function here. The elevator dinged 3 more times. Room 209 is waiting. You should go see what you've been keeping out all this time. I did not go to room 209. I stood in the breakfast room with the bag in my hands and the freezer empty behind me, and I understood what I'd been part of. The freezer wasn't protection. The sorted columns, the careful maintenance, 40-odd cards in their organized rows. That was never a barrier. It was a bribe. You give something that wants everything a portion of what it wants, and it stays in its room. Every card was a person the hanged man had marked, travelers who'd passed through, stopped in the lot, looked at a window at the wrong angle, received some invisible claim they drove away not knowing was on them. The freezer kept them cold and available. The hanged man kept its patience. The night auditor kept the cards frozen and stayed at the desk, and the arrangement held. The cards were not a defense, they were a payment. And the night auditor was not a guardian. The night auditor was a caretaker for the thing that was owed. I had just emptied the account. I tied the bag shut and carried it back to the office. I stepped over the salt line, every grain of it fully black from end to end, the white completely gone, and sat down in the desk chair with the bag on my lap. I put both arms around it. The building's tantrum continued. Ice machine roaring outside, lights burning wrong, elevator cycling, upstairs doors slamming at irregular intervals. From somewhere without a fixed location, the walls, the air, nowhere in particular, voices muttered. Not words I could separate, just sound at the frequency of language, the way a motel sounds when every room has a TV running too low to understand. I did not respond to any of it. The audit report printed at 3 a.m. The computer chimed, the page fed out onto the desk. I left it where it landed. Diane would deal with it. At 3:30, the ice machine was still running. At 3:51, still running. One upstairs door slammed at 4:02, hard enough that I felt it through the floor. At 4:09, a slow dragging from directly overhead, a line of sound moving from above the area of 209 toward the stairwell, then stopping. It moved once and did not move again. At 4:15, everything stopped at the same time. Not one thing at a time. All of it. Ice machine, wrong brightness, voices, doors, landing back into silence together, the way a hand comes flat on a table and ends something. The AC kicked back on. The lights returned to standard. The elevator display read L and held. I sat in the chair with the bag and did not move. The silence that followed was different from the silence before 2:07. Before, the ordinary quiet of a motel had carried underneath it the sense that something was deciding. This was the quiet after a decision had been made and the making of it was finished. I could tell the difference. I don't know how, but I could. 5 a.m. came. The clock turned over. I watched the lobby feed and the parking lot feed in the dark outside the front glass. The handprint on the glass was faint in the early light. The 6 cars in the lot hadn't moved. A truck passed on the highway at 5:40. First vehicle sound I'd heard all night. Loud, briefly, then gone. I kept both arms around the bag and waited for Diane. The voicemail from 159 was still on the desk phone. I was going to leave it for her. My phone lay face down on the desk, with a photo of me asleep at 2:03 a.m. still on it, the chair facing the hallway. I didn't look at it again. The pre-dawn blue outside turned incrementally toward gray and then toward something that was almost light. The sodium lamps were still running their orange pallor against it, dimmer now in comparison. The desert scrub beyond the lot edge acquiring outlines. The parking lot surfaces went from featureless dark to visible texture. Everything looked provisional in that light. like the world taking stock of itself before committing to another day. 6:07 a.m., a key in the front door. The key turned in the front door at 6:07 a.m. I heard it before I saw the handle move. The specific metallic sound of a key worked in a deadbolt, the two-stage click of the cylinder releasing. Not the handle moving on its own, not the hydraulic exhale of the door being pushed from outside. A key in a lock, turning the way keys turn when someone who belongs somewhere uses them. Diane Porter came through the door. She was wearing dark slacks and a white button-down, her blazer folded over her left forearm, a travel mug in her right hand. She moved the way a person moves at 6 in the morning who has been moving at 6 in the morning for a long time, deliberately, without hurry, with the economy of someone who has stopped wasting steps on things that don't require them. She let the door close behind her and walked to the front desk. She stopped. She was looking at the salt line. What was left of it? A black smear across the full width of the office threshold, every grain of salt darkened from one end of the doorframe to the other, the way a match head looks after it's been struck. She stood with her travel mug at her side and looked at it for a long time without saying anything. Then she looked at me. I was in the desk chair with the trash bag on my lap, both arms around it, in the same position I'd been in since approximately 2:37 a.m. My back hurt. My hands had gone stiff from 4 hours of holding the bag. I was awake in the specific way you're awake at the end of a night you didn't sleep through. Not tired exactly, just hollowed out, the way a room feels after everyone has left it and the air settles back to neutral. Diane looked at the salt line again, then at the bag. She set her travel mug on the counter, folded her blazer over the back of the desk chair beside the computer, and walked around the counter into the office. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask if I was all right, or how the night had gone, or whether anything unusual had occurred. She looked at the bag in my lap for a moment, taking stock of it, and then she held out her hand. I gave it to her. She carried the bag outside through the side exit, the one that opened onto the narrow strip of pavement between the building and the desert edge. I watched through the office window. There was a metal trash can against the exterior wall under the overhang, the kind with the hinged lid painted black, the base stained with years of use. She set the bag down beside it, lifted the lid, and transferred the contents directly into the can. The key cards clacked and rustled as they fell. Dozens of plastic rectangles in a loose pile at the bottom. The organized columns from the freezer now just debris. She reached into her pocket and came out with a lighter. She held the flame at the lip of the can. The cards caught slowly at first, plastic curling and darkening at the edges before the flame found something to work with. And then they were burning properly, a low orange fire filling the base of the can, sending up a thin gray column of smoke into the still morning air. Diane stepped back one pace, crossed her arms, and stood watching. The smoke column rose straight up in the windless air. Behind her, the desert was flat and pale in the low morning light, the scrub brush casting long shadows westward. The sodium lights on the parking lot poles had clicked off when the sun came up, and without their orange cast, everything looked its real color for the first time since I'd arrived the night before. She stood there for 5 minutes, maybe a little longer. I watched from the window, and she didn't move, except to tilt the lighter back into her pocket once it was clear the fire had taken. When the smoke column thinned to almost nothing, she dropped the lid back on the can, stood there one more moment as if making sure, and then she came back inside. She walked directly to the office and stood in the doorway, on the lobby side of the blackened salt line, not crossing it, and looked at the line again with the same unhurried attention she'd given it the first time. "The freezer has to stay full," she said. Her voice was quiet. Not angry, not accusatory, just tired in the way that goes all the way down, below the surface of the voice, the kind of tired that's been there long enough it's stopped being a feeling and become a condition. I stood up from the chair slowly, my back tightening through the full movement. "I quit," I said. Diane looked at me, not surprised, not disappointed. She looked at me the way she'd looked at the salt line, gathering information, processing it, not making more of it than it was. She nodded once and walked to the computer. The printer ran for about 30 seconds. Diane tore the sheet off cleanly and set it on the counter facing me without comment. A timesheet, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 7.5 hours at $12.50, $93.75 before taxes. The motel's name printed at the top, her signature at the bottom, the date in the corner. Direct deposit takes 2 weeks, she said. I'll cut you a check today. You can pick it up tomorrow, or I can mail it. Mail it, I said. She wrote something on a sticky note, Aaron's address, the one I'd put on the job application, the couch I was going back to, tore it off the pad, and put it in her breast pocket without showing it to me. She logged me out of the system. The screen returned to the login page. My session was closed. I picked up my backpack from the floor beside the chair. I took my jacket from the hook behind the desk. I picked up my phone. The photo of me asleep at 2:03 a.m. still in the camera roll, and put it in my pocket without looking at it. I went to the door. Then I stopped, because I'd been thinking about it for the last 2 hours, and there wasn't going to be a better moment. Your husband, I said. What happened to your husband? She was back at the keyboard, entering something. She didn't stop typing. He followed a rule wrong, she said. It happened in February, 8 months ago. She kept typing. The sentence had no excess in it, no explanation offered, no detail volunteered, no emotional frame around the fact. The implication was complete and self-contained. I stood with it for a moment and understood I was not going to ask which rule, or how exactly wrong, or what following a rule wrong looked like from the outside. Whatever it looked like, she had seen it. She was still here. She was still making the drive every morning to unlock the front door at 6:07 a.m. I'm sorry, I said. Mail's fine, she said. I have the address. I pushed through the front door. The morning outside was cold and clear. October dessert cold, the kind that sits in the air without wind and makes everything smell like distance. The parking lot was ordinary in full daylight. The 6 cars still in their spots from the night before, the sodium lamps pale and useless against the risen sun, the motel's beige-yellow exterior looking, in honest daylight, exactly like what it was supposed to look like. A roadside motel. Functional, forgettable, the kind that exists in the space between somewhere and somewhere else. I walked the access road and called Aaron at 6:45 a.m. He answered on the 4th ring, voice thick with sleep. Hey. Yeah, what? A pause. Danny, I need a ride. From where? The rustle of sheets, the slow wakefulness of someone being asked for something unexpected before 7 a.m. I gave him the exit. I-25, the motel sign, he'd see it from the highway. You okay? He said. I need a ride, I said again. Give me an hour, he said. I'll get Mateo's car. I did not look back at the building. That was a decision I made consciously, standing on the access road with my backpack. The motel was 200 feet behind me, and I was not going to turn around and look at it. The reason I could have given, if pressed, was this. Looking back at things you've left felt like a category of invitation I was permanently done issuing. I stood at the shoulder of the highway and waited. Trucks went past heading north, then a gap, then a flatbed with pipe, then a long stretch of nothing. The sun climbed and the desert warmed incrementally. The scrub brush went from gray-shadowed to its actual color, a dusty olive gray. The sky was a flat, clean blue, with no weather in it. Everything in every direction was ordinary, and I was grateful for that, without being able to say it out loud. I thought about Elena. She'd been in the back of my mind all night, not forgotten, just tabled, deferred to something after survival. The $93.75 wasn't going to solve anything. The money problems were still money problems. I was still broke and still on Aaron's couch, and still the person who had taken this job because the alternative was worse. Nothing about the night had changed any of that. What I had instead was the specific, unglamorous fact that I had sat in a chair from 2:37 a.m. to 6:07 a.m. with a trash bag on my lap and not opened a door when a voice that sounded exactly like someone I trusted told me to open it. That was the whole sum of what I'd done. It didn't feel like surviving. It felt like not doing something. Mateo's tan sedan appeared from the north at 7:51 a.m. Same dented car that had dropped me here 11 hours ago. It pulled onto the shoulder in front of me. Aaron got out of the passenger side, looked at me once, and didn't say anything. He opened the back door. I put my backpack in and got in after it. Mateo gave me a nod in the mirror. We pulled back onto I-25 heading north. Aaron didn't ask questions and I didn't offer anything. Mateo had the radio on low, something country and indistinct. I watched New Mexico go past the window. The desert flat on both sides, exit signs appearing at regular intervals, the road running straight north with nothing wrong with any of it. Socorro appeared on the right at late morning. We stopped at a gas station. Mateo got coffee. Aaron got a bag of chips, handed one back into the seat without looking. I ate 3 chips and held the bag. Somewhere between the gas station and the on-ramp, I took out my phone and went to my contacts. Diane Porter. I blocked the number. The contact went gray. I didn't delete the photo. My thumb hovered over the delete option for a moment, and then I put the phone back in my pocket. Evidence of something I had no one to show and nothing to do with. Filed somewhere I didn't have to open. We got back to Albuquerque by mid-afternoon. Aaron's apartment was exactly as I'd left it, the couch, the spare blanket folded on the armrest where I'd put it the morning before. The world had continued without incident in every direction except the one I'd been pointed in all night. I sat on the couch. Aaron made coffee and set a mug on the table in front of me and went back to the kitchen without asking if I wanted it. The check from Diane arrived Wednesday, $93.75, a personal check, her signature, no return address except a Socorro zip code. I cashed it at a check cashing place near Aaron's and walked out with $89.75 after the fee. Miguel called 2 more times that week. I answered the second call and told him Elena would have something by end of month. He accepted it the way he accepted everything, without warmth or enthusiasm. The money problems continued being money problems, which was what they'd been doing since before any of this started. I found overnight inventory work at a distribution warehouse the following week, $14 an hour, 5 nights a week. Nothing unusual about the job, nothing unusual ever happened there. I stayed 4 months, found a room to rent in February. Life continued the way life continues when it doesn't stop. One thing following another, the problems staying in roughly the same shape while the specific details shifted. I never went back to the motel. I'm not going to tell you it changed everything, or that I understood something new about the world that made me different afterward. Mostly what I understood was this: there are places that are wrong in ways that predate every building built on them, every road cut past them, every person who has ever stopped there. The motel on Route 25 is one of those places. It was wrong before 1973 when the Super 8 went up on that quarter-mile of desert, and it will be wrong after the building is eventually gone. The hanged man was there before the asphalt and the construction and the sign with the star and the vacancy light. He was there pushing against the door before anyone built a room over it. He will be there after the room is gone, pushing at whatever is left. The rules held the door closed. The night auditor maintained the rules. The freezer kept the hanged man patient, and the arrangement continued night after night, year after year, because the alternative was something nobody was prepared to deal with, and there was nothing useful to say about any of it out loud. The freezer is filling up again. Someone is sitting at that desk tonight with the rule sheet on the counter, watching the cameras, logging the checkouts. Someone is going to hear a knock on the glass at 11:12 and check the time and not open the door. The hanged man is in room 209, standing at the door with his enormous hands and his broken neck and the smooth blank space where his face should be, pushing at it the way he has been pushing at it since 1884, the way he will keep pushing at it as long as there is someone on the other side to push back. Some doors, once you know they're there, you spend the rest of your life making sure you never open them. The hanged man is still waiting in room 209. The freezer is filling up again with someone else's hands. And somewhere out on that highway, Jane and Stephen Thompson are still walking toward the next motel, the next night auditor, the next set of rules they'll try to make someone break. I don't think about it. That's the trick. You just don't think about it. I took the job because my sister needed me to. That's the only reason anyone takes a job this far from nowhere. The motel room was costing me $800 a month. My car was held together with duct tape and hope, and Mia's aunt was starting to talk about how much cheaper it would be if Mia just went to live with her dad in Arizona. Her dad is why I have custody papers in the first place. So, yeah. I took the job. The listing was a handwritten index card pinned to a corkboard outside a laundromat in Albuquerque. Overnight attendant needed. Gas station, Route 666 corridor, $13 per hour. On-site accommodations included. Call Suttree, a phone number, no address. I called at 9 in the morning. Voicemail. Called again at noon. Voicemail. By midnight, I'd given up and was lying on the motel mattress, the one with the spring that dug into my left shoulder, staring at the ceiling while the light fixture buzzed and flickered like it couldn't decide whether it wanted to keep going or just give out. I knew how it felt. The phone rang at 2 a.m. A man's voice, old and measured, the kind that had learned not to waste words. You called about the position. Yeah, the overnight shift. Can you work nights? Yes. Can you follow instructions? Yes. Are you afraid of the dark? I almost laughed. No. A pause, short but weighted. Then, you will be. He told me the shift ran 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. There was a room in the back where I could sleep between slow periods. $13 an hour, cash, twice a week. The station sat at the junction of two state highways, 60 miles from the nearest town. He didn't ask my name until the end. Vasquez, I said. Chris. Good. Like my name was the final box on a checklist. Come at 10 tomorrow. I drove out the next evening in my 2004 Civic, eating a gas station sandwich over the steering wheel, watching the highway unspool until the lights of Albuquerque faded and there was nothing on either side but dark desert and the occasional green flash of a highway marker. 45 minutes. Then the sign. Suttree's. Faded red neon, slightly uneven, like it had been put up by hand by someone who wasn't entirely sure it was straight. The last E flickered, not rhythmic, not steady on off, just an occasional hesitation, like a heartbeat skipping. I pulled into the gravel lot and looked at the place. 2 pump islands under fluorescent canopies. A small convenience store with a glass front door and barred windows. Power lines behind the station, and along them, shapes. Birds, I thought, though it was too dark to count. The highway ran east into absolute black. A man waited on the step outside. Old, mid-70s maybe, though it was hard to pin down, the way it's hard to date something shaped by decades of heat rather than time. Thin, button-down shirt tucked into work pants, worn boots. A face that didn't invite questions, not unfriendly, just settled. He stood when my headlights found him. Mr. Suttree? Just Suttree. One handshake, brief and firm. Come in. The tour took 10 minutes. Front area, 2 aisles, drink cooler along the back wall, counter with a register, a vending machine in the corner that hummed louder than it should. Behind the counter, a door to the back room. Small, low-ceilinged, smelling of old dust and something faintly metallic. Desk, cot, mini-fridge, a padlocked lockbox bolted under the desk, and on the wall facing the cot, a bulletin board. The bulletin board was covered, not neatly, accumulated over time, layered. Some papers typed on what looked like a typewriter, some handwritten in careful block letters, some on sticky notes in colors that suggested various decades. Some notes taped over others, some written directly on the cork and then partially covered, older writing visible at the edges. All numbered, all rules. Sotri stopped in the doorway and looked at the board the way you look at something you've checked many times. Not reading it, just confirming it was still there. Read those, follow them. Don't call me unless something follows you home. He walked out, got in a truck I hadn't heard pull up, and drove west. I watched his taillights until the dark took them. I stood in front of the bulletin board and started at the top. Rule 1, Pump 3 is always reserved. Serve immediately, no waiting, take their payment, wish them safe trip. I thought, eccentric owner policy. Rule 2, woman in a denim jacket by the pumps. Don't approach, don't speak, don't make eye contact. Call Sutri at 4 a.m. if she's still there. Rule 3, never let a crow inside. If one gets through the door, close the station, lock yourself in the back room, wait for dawn. Rule 4, if the pumps run when no one is using them, don't go outside. Something is taking gas, don't watch. Rule 5, pre-1960 bills go in the lockbox. Don't register them, don't spend them. Rule 6 stopped me. If the security camera shows someone standing behind you when you're alone, do not turn around. Walk to the back room. Count to 60. When you come out, check the footage. If they're still there, call Sutri and leave immediately. I looked at the security monitor in the corner. 4-grid feed, counter, aisles, lot, pumps. I was the only thing moving. I looked at the glass door back into the store. The reflection showed the dark store behind me, the cooler's standby glow, the back of my own head. For less than a second, the shape in the reflection looked wider than it should, like something slightly behind me that the camera wasn't showing. I turned around. Empty room. Camera agreed. I stood there breathing for 3 seconds and went back to the board. Rule 7, 3:33 a.m., all sound stops for exactly 13 seconds. Don't speak. Don't move. If a voice speaks during the silence, do not respond. Rule 10 landed differently than the others, even if it sounds like someone you know. Even if it sounds like your mother. Even if it sounds like Mia. I stopped at Mia's name, read it again. Someone, Sutri, or one of the people before me who had added to this board, had written my sister's name as the example. I told myself it was coincidence, common enough name. I was still telling myself that when the clock clicked to 11 p.m. and I went to the counter, she picked up on the second ring, voice flat with the low-grade tired of someone waiting for the day to be over. Hey, you eat? Cereal. Aunt Rosa's out again. Lock both doors tonight. I always do. Good. I'll call you tomorrow. I looked through the doorway at the bulletin board while we talked. A sticky note in green. The vending machine is older than the building. Do not eat what it gives you. How's work? She asked. Quiet, I said. Lot of sitting around. You sound weird. I'm tired. I hung up and stood at the counter listening to the fluorescent lights buzz, the pumps hum outside. The crows on the power lines hadn't moved. I counted 6 before I decided counting felt like the wrong kind of attention. At 11:47 p.m., headlights turned into the lot. The truck pulled in slow. A 1965 Ford F-100, immaculate, not restored, just original and perfect, like it had come off the line and driven here without accumulating damage. It pulled to pump 3. I was out the door before I consciously decided to go. Rule 1. The driver was already out. A man in his mid to late 60s, though something about him resisted easy assessment, like trying to date a photograph by the quality of its light. Work shirt, canvas pants, worn boots, pale, steady eyes. He looked at me without urgency. "Fill her up?" "Regular, if you don't mind." I started the pump. He stood beside the truck looking at the highway east, calm and distant, like someone waiting at a terminal they'd passed through many times. When the pump finished, he handed me a bill, 1957 silver certificate. The paper was crisp, not brittle, kept carefully, like someone thought it might still be used. Rule 5 was very clear. I put it in the lockbox. "Have a safe trip," I said. "Nice night," he said, measured movements back into the cab. The engine turned over too quietly for a 60-year-old vehicle. He pulled out and turned left onto the highway. I watched his taillights track west, waited for them to reach the horizon, the point where the road's slight curve should have taken them from sight. They didn't reach it. They faded, not dipped, not curved away, just faded, the way a sound fades when its source moves out of range until they simply weren't there anymore. I went inside and put the bill in the lockbox. The night moved slow. 2 cars stopped between midnight and 2 a.m., both heading east, both paying in ordinary money, both leaving without event. At 2 a.m., I called Mia, asleep, groggy, fine, doors locked, aunt still not back. I told her to go back to sleep. I set the phone on the counter. It rang immediately, no number, no name, just the call indicator pulsing. I answered. Static, not clean white noise, but textured, layered, multiple signals interfering. Under it, a rhythm. Slow and even, like breathing, in and out. Patient. Rule 10. Even if it sounds like Mia. This wasn't a name. This wasn't a voice. Just breathing, present, like something that wanted me to know it was there. I hung up. The phone didn't ring again. At 2:47 a.m., I needed air. The vending machine had started its internal cycling, a low mechanical shuffle I found for no rational reason deeply unsettling. I stepped outside. The crows saw me immediately, not by moving. There was no shift, no flutter, but every crow on the power lines oriented toward me in the same moment. The specific quality of collective attention, like a room full of people all looking at you at once, dozens of them, stretching the lines in both directions past the canopy light, and more on the transformer housing, and 2 on the canopy roof, and all of them watching with dark eyes that caught the fluorescent light and held it. I looked at them for almost 2 seconds. Then I remembered Rule 3. I looked away, counted my breaths, went back inside. I locked the door and stood at the counter. 25 years old. A parking lot. Some birds. The crows were still visible through the glass, lined up, patient. Then she was there. No arrival, no headlights, no sound of footsteps on gravel. Simply present, the way things in dreams are present. A sudden fact. A woman by pump 2, standing at the edge of the island with her back partly to me, face turned toward the highway east, denim jacket, dark jeans, dark hair, completely still in a way that had weight. Not a person holding still, but stillness that had been there before she arrived. Rule 2. I backed up until the counter was between me and the glass. I kept my eyes on her without meeting them. The peripheral, careful watch of someone looking at something they're not supposed to be looking at. She didn't move. She stood at pump 2 and watched the highway. I stood behind the counter and watched her. The crows watched everything. At 3:33 a.m., everything stopped. All at once. The fluorescent hum cut out. The cooler motor ceased. The vending machine went silent. The wind died. The hum of the power lines disappeared. The desert became so quiet I could hear my own pulse. I pressed my back against the counter and watched the second hand on the wall clock. 13 seconds. The first 5 were just silence. By the 6th, I understood the silence wasn't empty. It had texture, depth, the quality of a room with walls close together. On the 7th second, I had the sourceless sensation that something was taking attendance. Not me, specifically. All of it. The station, the lot, the highway in both directions. On the 10th second, I heard something. Not through the glass. Not carried on air. Present in the silence the way sounds are present in a dream. One syllable, low and even, from the direction of pump 2. Not words I could make out. Just acknowledgement. She was confirming she was still at her post. I didn't respond. My hands were shaking. I didn't respond. 11, 12, 13. The cooler hummed back on. The lights buzzed. The pump canopy returned its low sound from outside. I exhaled. The woman was still at pump 2. I watched her from behind the counter for another hour and 13 minutes. Did not approach, did not speak, did not let my eyes find her face directly. At 3:58 a.m., I glanced down to pick up my water bottle, and when I looked back, she was gone. No car, no footsteps, no retreating figure. The pump island stood empty under the pale canopy light. At 6 a.m., Suttree's truck pulled in. He came through the door, looked at me, and nodded once. "You're still here." "Yeah." He slid an envelope across the counter. Cash. He went to the back room, opened the lockbox, examined the 1957 bill, set it down carefully, came back, hung the key on its hook, walked to the door. "She was by pump 2, I said. "Left at 3:58. Nobody stopped for her." He paused at the door without turning. "Good." He pushed it open and stepped into the early light. His truck turned west and was gone. I drove home in the dawn, called Mia from the car. She was up, making toast, telling me about a history test. She sounded fine. She sounded like herself. I let her voice fill the car and tried to decide what I believed about last night. By the time I reached the motel, I'd stopped arguing with myself. I took out a notepad and wrote everything down, in order, because the previous attendant had kept a notebook, and whatever had happened to her, she had known to write things down. That seemed like the kind of knowledge worth respecting. The crows were on the motel's power lines when I pulled in. I counted them from the car. There were more than the night before. The second week, I stopped laughing at the rules. First week, I had a rationalization for everything. The taillights that faded before the horizon. Bad eyes, tired brain. The static on the phone. Old desert lines. Interference. The woman by pump 2. Some local Suttree hadn't thought to mention. By the end of week 1, I had every strange thing polished smooth enough to sleep on. Week 2, I stopped. Not because anything dramatic happened. Just because the lost driver came at 11:47 p.m. on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, and by Thursday, I was done reaching for explanations. I was just writing things down in the notebook. 11:47, F100, pump 3, 1961 $2 bill, safe trip, turned left, faded at the half-mile mark. Same as the night before, same as the night before that. When something is that consistent, you either accept it or you burn out fighting it, and I didn't have the energy to burn. 4 old bills in the lockbox now. I knew the lockbox by feel. The padlock's slight resistance, the way the lid caught before it opened all the way. I knew the bulletin board the same way. I'd stopped reading it straight through and started checking specific rules before critical hours, the way you check exits before a flight. Rule 2, not here yet. Rule 3, don't look too long. Rule 7, 40 minutes to threshold. The rules were no longer instructions I was following. They were a map I was navigating. The crows had gotten specific too. They weren't just shapes on the power lines anymore. One had a notch in its left wing, ragged at the edge, like something had caught it years ago and let go. One sat consistently higher than the others, on the topmost perch of the transformer housing, as if it had established seniority. One always faced west when the rest faced east, a chronic contrarian, or something that watched a different road. I noticed these things because I had nothing else to notice in the dead stretch between midnight and 1 a.m., and because noticing felt safer than not noticing. The crows understood human speech, the rule said. which meant if I thought too loudly near them, maybe they were hearing that too. The dreams had started by midweek, not insomnia. I fell asleep on the cot during slow hours without trouble, but the sleep was wrong. Long stretches of highway with no destination, the kind of dreams that feel more like memory than imagination, like somewhere in your past you actually drove this road and just forgot. Crows on every wire. And sometimes at the edge of the dream, a woman in a denim jacket standing very still at the side of the road, not looking directly at me, but aware of me the way a camera is aware of everything in its frame without caring about any of it specifically. I didn't tell Mia about the dreams. The 11 p.m. calls were an exercise in editing. Take everything true, replace it with the version she could sleep after. Work is fine, quiet, nothing interesting. How's school? You still sound weird, she said, Thursday of week 2. Like you're reading off a script. I'm just tired. You said that last week. I'm still tired. A pause, then. Are you eating? That almost made me laugh. 25 years old, former warehouse worker, watching things that shouldn't exist, walk the New Mexico dark. And my 16-year-old sister was asking if I was eating. Yes, I said. Go to sleep. After I hung up, I stood at the counter eating a granola bar from my jacket pocket and staring at the parking lot. The Suttrie's sign threw its faded red light across the gravel. The last E flickered. On, off, on, still there. By Friday of week 2, I'd settled into the shift's rhythm. The stretch between 12:30 and 1 a.m. was reliably dead. Between 1 and 4, anything could happen. After 4, the world reasserted itself, and the night became just a night again. I knew the lost driver came at 11:47, and that the saint came somewhere between 1 and 4, and never quite the same time twice. I knew the crows on the lines did not move until they wanted to, and that wanting was not something they did lightly or often. What I didn't know going into that Friday was that week 2 was when the rules stopped being abstract. It was 1:23 a.m. when the car pulled in, not the truck. A late model Honda with one headlight slightly dimmer than the other, and a bumper sticker I couldn't make out. It came in fast, braked too hard, gravel scattering under the tires. Pulled to pump 1, not pump 3. Fine. The driver got out, young, early 20s, hoodie half up against the 40-degree night. He had the wired, too alert look of someone who'd been running on caffeine for longer than was healthy, the particular brightness behind the eyes that isn't alertness but its expensive imitation. He pumped his gas, came inside, went to the drink cooler, and stood in front of it too long before grabbing a Red Bull, added a bag of chips, put them on the counter. "How far to the next town?" he asked. "East, about 60 miles, nothing in between." He nodded, automatic, the kind of nod that means I heard you, but I'm somewhere else. He paid in cash and went back out to his car. He didn't pull away. Engine still running, he sat in the driver's seat with the Red Bull unopened in the cup holder and the chips on his lap still sealed. He was looking at something on the passenger seat. I couldn't see what from my angle, but I could see his shoulders, tight, forward, the posture of someone listening very hard to something they can barely hear. His lips were moving. He was talking to whatever was on the passenger seat. Not a phone, no earpiece, just talking into the space beside him. I looked at the power lines. Every crow was facing the car. Not the station, not the highway. The car. The notch-winged one. The one with seniority. The contrarian that always faced west had turned east. All of its idiosyncratic positioning abandoned in favor of whatever drew every other eye on those wires. 40-some birds in complete silence, watching a young man talk to his passenger seat at 1:23 in the morning. Then the woman in the denim jacket was at pump 2, no arrival, no transition, just suddenly there, the way she was always suddenly there. But this time she wasn't facing the highway, she was facing the car, and her attention, usually diffuse, ambient, oriented toward the open road, was focused, specific, weighted. You could feel it through the glass across 30 feet of gravel. Whatever the kid in the Honda had lost, she had found it. She was waiting for him to notice her, waiting for him to turn his head and make whatever choice the moment required. Rule 2. Do not approach. Do not speak. Do not interfere. She will leave when she's ready. If you interfere, she might decide you're the one she's waiting for. I read it in my head again, hoping it would change on a second pass. It didn't. I looked at the kid. His shoulders shifted. A small contraction. The posture of someone who just got colder without understanding why. His head turned toward pump 2. He saw her. I was already moving. I told myself I was doing a lot check. I told myself this was routine. I did not tell myself I was breaking rule 2, because if I said it clearly, I might stop. And looking at that face through the window, the stillness, the sudden animal still of someone whose brain is refusing to process what their eyes are seeing, I couldn't stop. I pushed through the front door. Gravel loud under my boots. I went to the Honda, not toward the saint, keeping her in peripheral, the careful non-look I'd been practicing all week, and knocked on the driver's window. A long second. The window came down. Me like I was the first familiar thing, me like I was the first familiar thing he'd encountered in a long time. "You okay, man?" He laughed. Hollow, the sound of someone who has nothing funny left. "I've been driving for 3 days. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know why I'm here. I didn't ask about the passenger seat. Some doors you leave shut." "You need to keep driving," I said. "East, 60 miles to the next town. Don't stop until you get there." "What if—" "Don't stop. Keep going east. You'll get there." He looked at me for a moment. Then he nodded. A real nod, not the automatic one from inside. He rolled the window up. He pulled out of the lot, turned east on the highway, and didn't look back. I watched his taillights track east. They reached the horizon. They went over it the normal way. Distance, curve, dark, and something in my chest unknotted at the fact of normal. I turned around. Pump 2 was empty. The saint was gone. I stood in the gravel. The crows on the power lines were silent, all of them still facing the lot, but the car was gone. The object of their attention was gone. The silence they held now felt different from before, less like waiting, more like recording. I went back inside. I went straight to the security monitor. 4 grid feed, front counter, me standing alone. Aisles, empty, lot, empty, and the 4th quadrant, the wide interior shot from the corner camera above the door. Me at the counter, back to the glass door. In the reflection of the glass door, in the 4th feed, behind me on the monitor, the woman in the denim jacket was standing in the doorway. Not outside the glass. In the doorway. Not in any of the other 3 camera feeds. Not physically in the room. Only in the reflection of a door that led to a parking lot I had just been standing in alone. She was in the reflection the way something appears in a mirror that isn't physically behind you. She was watching me. Rule 6. I did not turn around. I kept my eyes on the monitor, and I walked, did not run, walked, to the back room door, closed it behind me, sat on the cot, counted 1, 2, 3. The bulletin board faced me from the opposite wall. Rules in different hands, different inks, different decades. I got to 60. I came back out. Monitor, front counter, empty. I checked the glass door. No handprint, no mark, no trace of presence. Through it, the lot, empty, pale, still under the canopy lights. The crows were on the lines, all of them, facing me now, through the distance and the glass. Not watching the way cameras watch. Passive, recording without preference, the other kind. The kind that has seen something it wants to understand. I looked away after 2 seconds. I stood at the counter and waited for 3:33 a.m. It arrived the way it always did. All at once, the hum cut, cooler stopped, vending machines silent, power lines losing their electrical murmur. The desert becoming a held breath, the station becoming the only lit thing for miles in every direction. I pressed my back against the counter. 13 seconds. The silence on week 2 felt different from week 1. On week 1, it had felt like an absence, a standard frequency switched off. On week 2, it felt inhabited, not by sound but by attention, denser, like the number of presences in the room had grown since I last checked. On the 9th second, a voice. Not from outside, not through the glass, not from the lot or the highway, from inside, behind my eyes, in the register of my own internal monologue. Except it wasn't mine. You helped him. Now you're hers. 10, 11, 12, 13. The cooler hummed back on. The lights buzzed. The electrical murmur returned to the power lines. I exhaled. I looked at the bulletin board. Rule 7 was underlined. A clean black line beneath the full text, fresh enough that the ink still had a faint sheen in the fluorescent light. I had not done that. I had not touched the board tonight. The underline was new. I stood in the back room doorway and looked at it for a long time. Then I went to the counter and sat on the stool and watched the lot until 6 a.m. when Suttree's truck pulled in and the old man came through the door. He put the envelope on the counter, checked the lockbox. On his way to the door, he stopped. Young man came through last night. Not a question. Around 1:20. Driving east by now? Yeah. He nodded, the slow nod of a calculation that came out the way he'd expected and had been hoping it wouldn't. He pulled the door open. Suttree. He stopped, didn't turn. The rule says if I interfere, she might decide I'm the one she's waiting for. You did what you did, he said. Can't undo it now. He got in his truck and drove west. I stood in the quiet station in the early light and thought about the voice in the silence and the underlined rule and what it might mean to be hers. I drove home. Called Mia from the car. She answered on the first ring, already up, eating over the sink. Normal. The sound of an ordinary Tuesday. I listened to her talk and checked, the way I'd started checking without naming it as a check, whether she sounded like herself. She did. I pulled into the motel lot and sat in the car in the morning quiet. The crows were on the wires above the building, there when I'd left the previous night, still there when I came back. I looked at the one with the notch in its wing. It looked back at me. I looked away first. That was already becoming habit. The 3rd week, I started writing things on my hand. Not reminders, just the basics. Things that should have been permanent. My name, Mia's phone number, the date. I wrote them in ballpoint on my left wrist where I could see them without taking my hand out of my pocket, and I told myself it was just precaution, just disrupted sleep, just the cognitive fog of 3 weeks on nights. By Monday of week 3, I couldn't remember Mia's number without looking. I'd had it memorized 4 years, since she got her first phone. The sequence had lived in my hands the way a combination lives in your fingers, automatic, pre-conscious, until I reached for it on Monday morning and found the space where it used to be oddly smooth. I had to scroll through contacts like a stranger, found it, called it, wrote it on my wrist before I could lose it again. She sounded fine, normal. A group project she was frustrated with, a quiz she thought she'd aced. I let the call run longer than usual just to hear her voice and run the check I always ran now, whether she sounded like herself. She did. You okay? She said, after I'd gone quiet. Yeah, just tired. You're always tired. That's the job. The crows had moved to the roof. In week 1, they were shapes on the power lines. In week 2, they'd gotten specific, individual. By week 3, they were above me. Not all of them, not all at once, but every night when I arrived, I heard them before I saw them. A dry scratch of talons on the shingles above the back room, patient and regular, like a slow clock. The back room had no windows. I'd known that since night 1. Week 3, I finally understood why. They could hear me in there. I could hear them above me. But neither of us could see the other, and the architecture had been doing that careful work for 70 years. I was grateful for 70 years of someone else's foresight. The saint appeared every night now. Not at a variable hour. Every night, reliably. At some point after 1 a.m., she was at pump 2. Not watching the highway anymore. Watching the station. Watching the door. The weight of her attention had changed from ambient to directed, and I felt it through the glass the way you feel a draft through a wall. Not seeing it, just knowing the cold is coming from somewhere specific. I filled my notebook faster than expected and started a second one, a dollar store composition book. I wrote everything down. Driver arrival times, bill denominations, saint appearance and departure times, crow positions, roof versus lines versus transformer, 3:33 a.m. silence quality. The voice didn't come in week 3's silences, just the inhabited, dense stillness of something paying close attention. Thursday of week 3, 11:47 p.m. I was outside before his headlights fully settled, the way I'd trained myself. Pump 3, F100, go. He handed me a bill through the window before he got out, a 1963 $5 bill, the paper with the particular density of currency made to last and kept well. I pocketed it for the lockbox and started the pump and was already forming the words when I heard the door, the truck door, opening. He was out, standing beside the F100 on the gravel with his pale, steady eyes moving from the sign to the door to me, and he looked, for the first time in 3 weeks, uncertain. Not lost exactly, more like a man who has been taking the same route for 50 years and has just now noticed something that doesn't fit. The lost driver never left his truck. "I think I'm lost," he said. Same measured voice, same quiet, but something underneath it now, the quality of a question that had been building long enough to find pressure. "Can you help me find my way home?" Rule 1 covered serving him and wishing him safe trip. It didn't cover this. "I need you to get back in your truck," I said. He tilted his head. "I always turn left, but I never get home." His face did something complicated. "My wife's been waiting a long time." I did not ask about his wife. I don't know how I knew not to. With the specific certainty I felt it. Some knowledge that had arrived without a source, the way certain fears arrive. Don't let him tell you about his wife. "Tonight you go straight," I said. "Not left, straight, east." A long moment. Something moved behind his eyes. Not intelligence exactly, but the memory of it. The shape of a decision. He nodded once. The slow nod of a man making a choice that costs him something. And got back in the truck. He drove straight. East past the pump islands. East past the edge of the lot. East onto the highway. His taillights tracking away in the right direction. For the first time in however many years he'd been looping this road. I watched them until they went over the horizon the normal way, reaching it, cresting it, disappearing. Then the crows erupted. Every bird on the lines and the transformer housing and the station roof took flight at once. Not the individual liftoff of birds making separate choices, the mass movement of a single thing expressing something, hundreds of wings, a sound like tearing paper, and underneath it a screaming that had the shape of alarm and the texture of language. They moved east, following his taillights into the dark, and I stood in the empty lot and watched them until the sound faded and the power lines were bare and the roof was silent. For the first time in 3 weeks, the station was genuinely quiet. I looked back at the door. The saint was there. Not at pump 2. At the glass front door, inches from the glass, close enough that through it I could see the details of her face I'd spent 3 weeks not looking at. I kept my eyes at the level of her collar. I walked toward the door anyway. Not toward her, toward the door, keeping the glass between us, stopping when I was close enough that the distance was deliberate rather than cautious. Through the glass, she watched me. No shadow on the gravel under the canopy light, no breath fog on the glass from her side, just her stillness and her attention and the wrong quality of her presence at close range, the temperature drop that the rules hadn't needed to explain because you felt it and you knew. I went in through the side door, locked it, locked the backroom door behind me, sat on the cot and let my heart do what it needed to do. That was when I looked under the cot, not for any reason, just the animal awareness of a small enclosed space under pressure, the checking of corners. I tilted forward and looked, and in the far corner against the wall, in the undisturbed dust, there was a notebook. Spiral-bound black cover, shoved far enough back to not be found, unless you were at floor level looking. I pulled it out and opened it. Neat block letters on the first page, careful and organized. The hand of someone who had started with the intention of being thorough and had, over time, become someone for whom thoroughness cost more than they had. Night 1. Rules read. Lost driver arrived 11:47, pump 3. Woman in denim jacket by pump 2 from approximately 2 a.m. Left 3:52. Crows on lines. 3:33 silence. 13 seconds. Normal. Jenna. I'd known about her since the first week. The previous attendant, 2 years, transferred. The photo on the desk showed her at the pumps at sunset. In the photo, the reflection in the glass door showed a woman waving. Jenna was alone in the frame. I read the notebook the way you read something you're not sure you want to finish. 2 years of documentation, careful at first, then loosening. She'd individuated the crows the way I had. There was a drawing of the notch-winged one, and seeing it felt like finding your own handwriting in someone else's journal. She'd noticed the same things I noticed. She'd cataloged the same silences. Month 7, shorter entries. Month 9, dates, but no times. By month 12, some pages had a single line. And in the margins, in small, compressed writing, she's at the door again, same as last night. I forgot my sister's number this morning, had to look it up. I stopped, read it again, felt something in my chest go cold and specific. Then, next line, in slightly different ink, like she'd come back to correct it. No, that's wrong. I don't have a sister. I meant, I forgot my aunt's number. I sat with that for a while. Near the end, I helped someone. The saint noticed. She follows me now, not just at the station, at home, at the grocery store, in my dreams, at the foot of the bed. I asked Sutri what to do. He said drive east and don't look back. I can't remember my route home without GPS. Yesterday I couldn't remember my last name. The final entry was undated. Barely her handwriting. If you're reading this, don't help anyone. Just follow the rules. They're not suggestions. They're the only thing keeping you here. I closed the notebook and set it on the desk and sat there for a long time. The crows were back on the roof. I hadn't heard them return. They'd come back during the reading, settling overhead one by one until the sound above me was steady and patient again. The familiar slow clock scratch of the hive back at its post. At 2 a.m., I called Mia. 4 rings, voicemail, called again. 4 rings, voicemail. Called Aunt Rosa's landline and got a flat, constant, busy signal, not in use, off the hook. The particular signal of a line that had stopped trying. I sat with the phone and thought about 60 miles, about the Civic and the dark highway and the unspoken rule, the one everyone knew, about not leaving before dawn. I was 60 miles from my sister, and I couldn't reach her, and the crows were scratching overhead, and Jenna's last line was sitting on the desk in front of me. I called Mia's number a 3rd time. Voicemail. I wrote her number on my wrist again, over the existing ink, making it darker. At 3:33 a.m., the silence arrived. All at once, fluorescent hum, cooler motor, crow scratch, desert wind, all extinguished simultaneously, the held breath, the census. I pressed my hand over my mouth and counted. On the 7th second, from the direction of the phone, from inside the room, from the specific quality of air in a closed space that had just changed, the way a room changes when someone steps into it. Mia's voice. "Chris? Where are you?" I'm scared, my whole body locked, hand harder over my mouth. Rule 7 is pure reflex. The highway remembers names. It collects them. If it's using her voice, Chris. Quieter. I don't know where I am. 11, 12, 13. The cooler hummed on. The lights buzzed back. The crows shifted above me, the collective repositioning of the hive. The phone rang. Her number. Her actual number, the 7 digits on my wrist. I answered before the second ring. "Hey." Her voice was normal, the flat, real-world normal of someone woken by a phone. "Why are you calling at 4? "I called earlier. You didn't pick up." "I was asleep. What's wrong?" I exhaled slowly through my nose. "Phone lines out here are bad. Just checking." "I'm fine. Aunt Rose is home." A pause, the sound of blankets. "Are you okay?" "Yeah. Lock the doors." "They're locked." "Good. Go back to sleep." After I hung up, I held the phone for a while and thought about what I'd heard in the silence and what that meant. The highway had her name. It had been collecting names since before the interstate was built, and now it had hers, and it knew her voice well enough to use it. I looked at Jenna's notebook. I forgot my sister's number this morning. Had to look it up. The correction she'd made in slightly different ink, a day or a week later. I don't have a sister. I opened my composition book to a new page. I wrote, "Week 3. The highway has her name. Don't forget why you're here." Then I wrote Mia's number at the top of every blank page that remained, because I wasn't going to let that particular thing get smooth on me. Some things you have to keep writing down. Some things you have to insist on. The 4th week, I stopped writing things on my hand, not because I remembered everything again, because I'd accepted that the notebook was more reliable than skin. I kept Mia's number at the top of every page, the date in the top right corner, my name on the inside front cover. The station had taken things from Jenna over 2 years. It had taken Mia's number from me in 3 weeks. I wasn't going to be careless about what I held on to. The driver didn't come the 4 nights after Thursday. Pump 3 sat lit and empty, and the gravel where he always pulled in stayed undisturbed. I checked my notebook to make sure I had the right days written down. I did. He just wasn't there. I couldn't decide if that was better or worse. The crows had returned to the power lines, not the roof, back to the standard configuration, but their number had changed. I'd counted around 40 in week 1. By week 4, the lines sagged with weight. I stopped trying to count. Something about the driver going east had registered as significant enough to require additional witnesses. The saint was at pump 2 again, not the door. Back to pump 2, watching the highway. After Thursday, she'd stepped back, like the pressure that had brought her to the glass had been partially released, or like she was waiting for a specific condition before she came forward again. I kept Jenna's notebook on the desk next to mine and read sections before each shift the way some people read before bed, not for comfort, but for the specific readiness that comes from knowing what's next. The following Monday night, 1:15 a.m. I was behind the counter with both notebooks open when the pump canopy lights did their dimming, the drawing down of voltage that preceded her the way a temperature drop precedes weather. She was at the glass front door. Dark hair, denim jacket, the stillness that had weight, and the temperature of a room that has been empty for a long time. Not pump 2, the door. I could see my own breath inside the store now. I was holding Jenna's notebook. I'd had it open to the last page. We stood on opposite sides of the glass. I kept my eyes on her collarbone. The crows were silent. The cooler hummed. My breath showed and hers didn't. She raised her hand and pressed it to the glass, not leaving a print, just the shape of a hand against a surface, and asking, "No fog, no warmth, no pressure, just a door she wanted opened." I understood what she was asking. I'd understood since the voice in the silence told me, "Now, you're hers." She was waiting for me to step through, to be found the way the traveler would have been found if I hadn't knocked on his window, picked up, placed, set moving down a road of her choosing. She didn't hurt the ones she took. She just gave them a road, and they drove it forever. "Not me," I said, flat and low. "I'm not the one." She tilted her head. Then her face changed. One frame, the way a film cuts, and for less than 2 seconds it was Mia's face. Not a photograph, not an approximation. The specific geography of my sister at rest, the line of her jaw, the set of her mouth when she's trying not to show that something bothers her. The highway had had her name long enough to study what went with it. Then it was the saint's face again, watching. I took one step back, kept my eyes below her face. When I looked at the door again, she was simply gone. No departure, no transition, just the empty pump island and the lot and the sign with its flickering E going on and off in the cold. I went to the back room and wrote in my notebook, Week 4. She showed me Mia's face. The highway has had her name long enough to know what she looks like. I sat with that for a while. At 2:17 a.m., I went outside because I needed air, and the crow with the notch in its left wing was on the canopy peak directly above the front door. I stood in the lot and looked at the gravel. I'd come out already knowing I was going to hear it speak, the same way you know some conversations are unavoidable. "She'll find someone else," it said. Jenna's voice. Not a voice I'd ever heard, but a voice that understood exactly what it had cost to be here 2 years and then drive east alone, trying to remember your own name. "She always does, but you're marked now. The highway knows your sister's name." I didn't run. The rule said leave the building and call Suttree. I was already outside. How do I fix it? I kept my eyes on the crow's wing, on the notch, not on its eyes. Under 3 seconds. You don't. You just delay, follow the rules. Keep her from finding Mia, stay here as long as it takes. How long? The crow regarded me with the patience of something watching this road since 1952. Jenna lasted 2 years. How long will you last? I didn't answer. I went inside and called Suttree's number. It rang 5 times and went to a recorded message. I left no message. The rule said call. I called. What Suttree did with that was his business. At 3:33 a.m., the silence arrived. The switch off. Immediate, total, cooler, lights, the crow scratch that had resumed when I came back inside, the distant highway sound, all gone simultaneously. I pressed my back to the counter and set both notebooks flat beside me. On the 4th second, headlights appeared on the highway, coming from the west. The round, warm yellow of old headlights, the kind of vehicle built before halogen, moving at a steady speed, not hurrying because hurry had stopped being relevant. The 1965 Ford F-100 pulled into the lot, not at 11:47, at 3:33, in the silence, during the 13 seconds when the entities acknowledged each other. He was not alone. Behind the truck, filling the lot entrance and stretching back down the highway as far as the canopy lights reached, and further still in the dark beyond, cars. A station wagon with wood panel sides, a boxy sedan, a camper shell pickup, models from every decade, moving at the same steady speed, turning in one by one. The lot should not have held them all. The station accommodated them anyway, the way it accommodated most things that weren't supposed to fit. The driver got out. He looked different from Thursday of week 3, solid, cleaner somehow. The particular quality of someone who has put down something they've been carrying for 50 years and has not yet forgotten the sensation of standing without the weight. He came inside. I'd opened the door before he knocked. "I went straight," he said. "Like you told me." "I know." "I found the end of the road." He said it quietly, like a fact that still surprised him. "There is one. I just had to stop turning left." He reached into his canvas shirt pocket and held out a key. Old iron, rusted at the bow, the teeth worn from use. The kind of key that opens something that hasn't been opened in a long time, not because it's locked, but because no one had thought to look for the door. "The station has a back door," he said. "Not the one to the back room. A different one. It only opens at dawn. Take this and walk through. You'll end up somewhere else. Somewhere the highway doesn't reach." I looked at the key, then at the lot behind him. Car doors opening, figures stepping out and orienting east, stretching the way people do after a long drive, looking around like they just now remembered how to stop. "Who are they?" "The ones who kept turning left. The saint collected them, one at a time." He set the key on the counter. "I found the way out. Now I have to show them." He walked back to the door. I watched him cross the lot, get in the truck, the headlights come on. The line of cars followed him east, taillights diminishing the ordinary way, distance and curve and dark, until they were gone. The silence ended at exactly 13. The cooler hummed back on. The lights returned. I was alone in the lit station with a key on the counter and the eastern horizon beginning very slowly to separate itself from the dark above it. I stood at the counter for a long time, holding the key. The iron was real. The rust came off on my palm. The station had a back door. I knew it the way you know things about a place you've been long enough, without needing to look. I could go, walk through at dawn, end up somewhere the highway didn't map, somewhere Mia's name hadn't been carried across 60 miles of empty desert and spoken into the dark. But Mia's name was already out there. The saint had stood at my door and shown me my sister's face with the accuracy of something that had been studying it. If I left, whoever came next for this job wouldn't know that. Wouldn't know the highway was waiting on a specific name. Wouldn't know what it meant when Pump 2 flickered and the figure there stopped watching the road and started watching the door. If I walked through, who watched for her? I went to the lockbox, unlocked it, lifted the lid, looked at the old bills inside. Every decade the driver had ever paid with, the weight of that accumulated history in a metal box under a desk. I set the key among them along one side, closed the lid, snapped the lock. Then I sat down behind the counter and waited for Sutri. He arrived at 6 a.m. Through the door, one look at me, the inventory of a man who had been doing this long enough to know what a kept promise looked like on a person's face. "You're still here," he said. "Yeah." He nodded. Not the calculation nod I'd cataloged over 4 weeks. The other kind. He slid an envelope across the counter, thicker than usual. "What's this?" "Hazard pay. You earned it." He went to the back room. A long pause. The lockbox, the key, the recognition, and he came back out without a word about it. At the door, he stopped. I'd known I was going to say it. She showed me Mia's face. "I know. You could have warned me." He was quiet. The door was half open, morning light flat and indifferent. "Wouldn't have changed what you did," he said. "You'd still have gone to that car." He pushed the door the rest of the way open. "Get some sleep." He drove west. I counted the envelope. Enough for a deposit on an apartment closer to the station, a second bedroom, the start of something that looked less like surviving and more like building. Enough to put custody papers in motion as a process rather than a plan. I drove home in the dawn, called Mia from the car. She answered immediately, already up, already audibly eating something. "When are you coming to visit?" she asked. "I'm getting an apartment," I said. "Somewhere with a second bedroom." A pause. "Yeah?" "Yeah. I'll need help unpacking." Just, "Okay." The way she said things that mattered without making a production of them, that was Mia. The crows followed me to the city limits and stopped there, watching me go. I looked at them in the rear view and then looked back at the road. At the 40-mile mark, the Saint was at the side of the highway. Denim jacket, dark hair, thumb out, the position she'd held since before the interstate. I kept my eyes forward. In the rear view, she was a figure getting smaller, and then the road curved, and she was gone. Not following. Just waiting. I still work the night shift at Suttrie's. Still pump gas for the driver. He doesn't come every night anymore, but when he does, he pulls to pump 3 and pays with whatever old bill he's carrying, and turns east, always east, taillights reaching the horizon the normal way. Still watch the crows from inside the building, never letting them through the door. Still see the Saint at pump 2 most nights, watching the highway for whoever's next. Mia's in a better place. Second bedroom, a real school, a debate team for someone who argues everything on principle. She doesn't know about the gas station. She thinks I work security. She asks sometimes why I check the locks twice before she goes to sleep, why I go still every night at 3:33 a.m. for exactly 13 seconds without speaking. Habit, I tell her. It's nothing, but every night I hold my breath and listen, and I wait to hear if the highway decides to call her name. It hasn't. Not yet. It's patient, the way everything out here is patient. The crows, the Saint, the long empty road that goes 60 miles before it reaches the nearest town of any size. Someone has to watch the door. Someone has to follow the rules. Someone has to make sure the things that walk the highway at night stay on their side of the glass. Suttrie was right on the first night. I was afraid of the dark. I just learned to work in it anyway.